Chapter 563. East Sea Coast. On the warship, early morning. In the cabin, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was wearing a gray robe, sat on a praying mat with his brows tightly knitted. In front of him, a black-clothed ninja with a sword on his back and a veil on his face was kneeling on one knee. That means that the three demons were not sent by great god Sietian to kill Yi Fan? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked the black-clothed ninja. The black-clothed ninja nodded. So it's like this. Matsumoto Takeyoshi let out a long breath and muttered to himself. The news that the black-clothed ninja brought back made his worried heart fall to the ground. His deduction was not wrong. The one who sent the three demons to kill Yi Fan was the demon king of the 9 demons and not great god Sietian. If great god Sietian wanted to kill Yi Fan, he would have sent someone to inform him. Where is Nieching now? Is he still in the great Ming dynasty? Matsumoto Takeyoshi picked up a cup of tea and asked the black-clothed ninja. Replying to Master, I heard from the Demon King that Nieching is currently in the East Ocean continent. The black-clothed ninja replied. That's good. Matsumoto Takeyoshi nodded as he drank his tea. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was not surprised that Nieching was able to force back the 3 demons with one move. Since this person and Bai Sheng from the 10,000 Immortals house could make great god Sietian feel troubled, they were definitely not ordinary people. It was reasonable that the 3 demons were not their opponent. He was originally worried that Nieching would stay in the great Ming dynasty to fight against him. But now, it seemed that his worries were unnecessary. Master, this subordinate has something to report to you. The black-clothed ninja raised his head and said. What is it? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked. Xuanji is dead. The black-clothed ninja raised his head and said. What? Dead? Matsumoto Takeyoshi immediately frowned when he heard this. He held the teacup in his hand and asked the ninja in black, What happened? On the second day after young master led the troops to the border, the crown prince of the great Ming dynasty led a large number of masters straight into the imperial palace and captured Xuanji alive. The ninja in black said, Idiot! Matsumoto Takeyoshi flew into a rage and threw the teacup in his hand onto the ground. But the teacup shattered and water splashed everywhere. This time, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was known for being unfazed even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, was truly angry. With Xuanji's cowardly personality, as long as he was tortured a little, he would definitely spill everything he knew. The crown prince must have known everything about him by now. Not only that, the emperor who was under house arrest must have regained his power. Seeing that Matsumoto Takeyoshi was angry, the ninja in black lowered his head. Where's Spy? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked angrily. That bastard Xuanji was captured. Is Spy also captured? Why didn't they spread the news immediately? My lord, the ninja in black lowered his head and replied, before the crown prince of the great Ming dynasty broke into the imperial palace, he had already sent people to surround the entire imperial palace and completely blocked all the roads leading to the capital. The people we planted inside couldn't pass the news to the outside at all. Matsumoto Takeyoshi narrowed his eyes and his expression became solemn. All of a sudden, everything came to the surface. The armies of the 4 countries gathered and the heavy military force was just a pretense. Their real purpose was to assassinate their only son, Zhou Dao, and rescue the emperor. And the initiator of all this was none other than the crown prince of the great Ming dynasty. On one hand, he secretly contacted the 4 countries and asked them to send a large number of troops to the border. On the surface, he put on a posture of a large-scale attack on the great Ming dynasty, but secretly deployed elite assassins to kill Zhou Dao. On the other hand, he logically sent Zhou Dao, who held military power, to the border to defend against the enemy. When Zhou Dao was far away from the capital, he led a large number of people into the imperial palace to rescue the emperor, capture Xuanji, and rescue the emperor who was under house arrest. What a good move! Building one path in the open while secretly plotting another in the dark. What a good move! The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Matsumoto Takeyoshi didn't expect that the stupid emperor could give birth to such an intelligent crown prince. He was actually able to set up such a shocking plan that killed two birds with one stone. At first, he didn't take the crown prince seriously. He thought that as long as he controlled the emperor, everything would be fine. Now it seemed that he was wrong. As the saying goes, a dike of 1,000 miles can be destroyed by an ant's nest. It was because of his negligence that he was in such a passive situation. Thinking of this, Matsumoto Takeyoshi lamented that he didn't give birth to a good son. If his only son, Tai Lang, had half the wisdom of the crown prince, how could he be in such a passive situation today? Where is Tai Lang now? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked with a frown. My lord, the young master is now guarding the border, the ninja in black replied. What's the situation at the border now? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked. Both sides are biding their time, the ninja in black replied. The four countries are now showing signs of withdrawing their troops. Send someone to tell Tai Lang not to bide their time, attack fiercely. Without my permission, don't stop the war. Matsumoto Takeyoshi angrily slammed his palm on the table and said with gritted teeth, also, order the ninja troops to protect the young master's safety. Within a month, I want half of the troops of the four countries at the border to be lost. Since the other party had set up a trap, he would beat them at their own game and completely mess up the situation. Didn't the four countries pretend to besiege us? Fine, then I'll really attack you fiercely and see how the four countries respond. Once the four countries suffered heavy losses, they would definitely be angry. The fake besiegement would become an all-out war. At that time, even if the great Ming dynasty didn't want to get involved in the war, it would be useless. When the war broke out, he would order Zhou Dao to lead a large number of troops to withdraw from the battlefield and let the troops of the four countries into the great Ming dynasty. He would let the wolves into the house and watch the tigers fight. After hearing Matsumoto Takeyoshi's words, the man in white standing behind him nodded slightly. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was indeed very intelligent, 1 in a million. He could easily turn the disadvantage of being attacked from two sides into an advantage in an instant. This trick of turning the tables and sowing discord was used by him to the point of perfection. Yes. The ninja in black lowered his head and replied. Matsumoto Takeyoshi waved his hand, and the ninja in black understood and retreated out of the cabin door. Since he did this, I'll do the same, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he picked up a white porcelain cup from the tea tray, picked up the teapot and poured tea again. He wanted to kill my only son, so I'll destroy his country. Although the young master is protected by the ninja troops, it can't guarantee that there won't be any danger. The man in white who had been silent said to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, Sir, it's best to send 2 people to help him. I have the same intention. Matsumoto Takeyoshi picked up the teacup and drank a mouthful of fragrant tea, and said, Taro is brave but not smart, and he's not scheming. If he's allowed to mess around, maybe the previous failure will happen again. Sir, who do you plan to send to help the young master? The man in white asked. Who do you think is suitable, Mr. Yamada? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked. That depends on how many people you plan to send, the man in white replied. 2, no more, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. If it's 2, I think it's more appropriate to send Fujita Takashi and Sato Kawakai, the man in white said. Fujita Takashi, Sato Kawakai. Matsumoto Takeyoshi narrowed his eyes and repeated the names of the 2 men. Fujita Takashi is calm when he's in trouble. He's low-key and is proficient in Chimenduanjiao. His swordsmanship is superb, and his eyesight is unparalleled in the world. He can be of great use, the man in white said. Matsumoto Takeyoshi nodded slightly. As for Sato Kawakai, although this person is addicted to beauty, his cultivation is not shallow. He's ruthless when he fights, and his moves are insidious, the man in white continued. Among the 13 masters, no one is more suitable than him when it comes to fighting and killing. Between the two of them, one is intelligent and one is brave, one is reserved and one is released. It's an excellent combination. Well, Matsumoto Takeyoshi nodded after listening to the man in white. As you said, send these 2 men to the border to help Taro kill the enemy. The man in white nodded. Just as Matsumoto Takeyoshi and the man in white were talking, the voice of the gatekeeper ninja came in. Master, Mr. Yi is back. The gatekeeper's words made the 2 of them frown instantly, and they were shocked. Matsumoto Takeyoshi did not expect Yi Fan, who was severely injured by Kimura Misaki, one of the 9 demons, to return to the East Sea so quickly. The man in white was shocked that he did not notice Yi Fan's arrival at all. Every time Yi Fan came close to the warship, he would sense Yi Fan's aura. However, this time, he did not sense it at all. Whoosh! As the wooden door of the cabin slid open, Yi Fan, who was wearing a beautiful black robe, with a jade belt around his waist and a red blood demon badge hanging from his neck, walked in expressionlessly. Matsumoto Takeyoshi and the man in white gasped when they saw the green light flashing upside down between Yi Fan's eyebrows. They could not believe their eyes. Yi Fan had turned into a demon. Although the 2 of them had not seen the ancient book on the possession of the demonic Taoist Li Si, they were not completely unaware of the matter. The reason was very simple. The ancient book in Li Si's hand was not the only one that recorded the matter of being possessed. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was well versed in the ancient Chinese culture and had collected many ancient books. Among these ancient books, a large portion of them introduced the matter of being possessed by the demonic Taoist. Although these ancient books did not record the mantra to enter the demonic realm, they more or less recorded some knowledge of being possessed by the demonic Taoist. Such ancient books existed all over the world. Naturally, this included the ancient books circulating among the Japanese. In Matsumoto Takeyoshi's collection of ancient books, other than the ancient books about the 9 cauldrons, the rest of the ancient books were all about obtaining great power. Regarding being possessed by the demonic Taoist, these ancient books had different explanations and emphasized different things. However, the sign of being possessed by the demonic Taoist was surprisingly consistent. They did not expect the records in the ancient books to be true. They also did not expect Yi Fan to be possessed by the demonic Taoist. The man in white finally understood why he could not sense Yi Fan's aura. Yi Fan was not using his physical body's spiritual energy. He was using the demonic spiritual energy in his primordial spirit. At this moment, Yi Fan's cultivation was no longer the same as before. It had far surpassed his. In other words, if Yi Fan wanted to kill him now, it would be a piece of cake. Chapter 564. After entering the cabin, Yi Fan asked the shocked Matsumoto Takeyoshi, "Where's Hong Ji's body?" When he returned to the cabin, he was shocked to find that Akatsuki, who was originally placed in the sleeping cabin and wrapped in an ice coffin, was nowhere to be found. In a hurry, he went directly to Matsumoto Takeyoshi's cabin to ask about the whereabouts of the corpse. "I've already sent someone to bury Miss Yu. What's wrong? What happened?" Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who had just recovered from his shock, replied. "Buried?" When Yi Fan heard this, he frowned and his heart was filled with shock. He didn't expect Matsumoto Takeyoshi to have already buried Akatsuki. "Miss Yu was a VIP that I invited. You weren't around for the past few days. I can't possibly leave her body in your ship to rot, right?" Matsumoto Takeyoshi looked at Yi Fan and said, "So I asked Mr. Yamada to break the barrier that you set up on the ship and send someone to bury Miss Yu according to Japanese etiquette." Yi Fan stared at Matsumoto Takeyoshi with his reddened eyes and asked loudly, "Where did you bury her?" Hearing Yi Fan's question, Matsumoto Takeyoshi turned his head to look at the man in white behind him. There's an uninhabited island 300 miles southeast of here. I asked someone to bury her there, the man in white answered Yi Fan. The expressionless Yi Fan raised his head to look at the man in white. Then, he turned around and flicked his sleeve. With a swoosh, he turned into a glaring green light and flew out of the cabin. He shot straight into the sky and headed southeast at full speed. Whoosh! Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was sitting on the futon, and Shingo Yamada, who was standing behind him, had their clothes fluttering in the wind caused by Yi Fan's movements. The two ninjas who were guarding the entrance looked at each other. They were both dumbfounded. They had seen people with fast movement techniques, but they had never seen such a heaven-defying movement technique. To be able to turn one's body into a ray of light, how high would one's cultivation have to be able to do this? After the green light disappeared into the horizon, the two of them slowly came back to their senses and slowly closed the cabin door with a stunned expression. Inside the cabin, Matsumoto Takeyoshi and the man in white remained silent. After a long time, Matsumoto Takeyoshi broke the silence and turned to ask the man in white, "With your current cultivation, how confident are you in defeating him?" "Before he turned into a demon, I had a 70% chance of defeating him. But now," the man in white slowly shook his head and said, "I don't even have a 50% chance of winning." Matsumoto Takeyoshi's expression changed and turned solemn. If it weren't for the fact that Fujiwara Chico's true soul was in his hands, he would have died a long time ago. This true soul went from a bargaining chip to threaten Yi Fan to a life-saving straw. This change made Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who had always had a card up his sleeve, a little uncomfortable. "It seems that we have to do that thing," Matsumoto Takeyoshi said with a frown. He slowly picked up his teacup and gently sipped his tea. "Yes," the man in white replied. "There's no time to lose. Tonight, I will extract the spiritual power of 100 demons from the soul-gathering evil cauldron and gather it into your body," Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he stood up from the futon and turned to look at the man in white. "I'll have to trouble you this time, Mr. Shingo." The man in white nodded slightly. On an uninhabited island 300 miles away, a stone tomb stood quietly in a bush. In front of the tomb, a huge bluestone tombstone stood alone. On the tombstone, the words, "Tomb of Beloved General Akatsuki," were engraved in red Japanese. It was extremely eye-catching. Isolated island, lonely tomb, red words, tombstone, and a paper banner stuck to the side of the tomb that constantly swayed in the wind. It looked lonely and desolate. Whoosh! A streak of lightning-like green light broke through the clouds above the island, heading straight for the island. Whoosh! The silver-haired, black-robed Yi Fan, holding Baihu, appeared in front of the tombstone in an instant. Hong Ji. When he saw the tomb in front of him, Yi Fan, whose eyes were red, spoke in a choked voice. He slowly stroked the cold tombstone with his hand, 2 lines of hot tears slowly flowing from his eyes. "Woo!" Baihu, who was in his arms, jumped down from Yi Fan's arms and ran to the tombstone, whimpering in a low voice. Akatsuki had saved its life and got along well with it. She took care of it and their relationship was very close. In addition, Akatsuki had died of blood loss because of Yi Fan, so Baihu was naturally very sad. A person, a fox, a tomb, and an island. The most desolate and miserable scene in the world was probably nothing more than this. After calming down a little, Yi Fan said to Baihu, who was in front of the tombstone, "Xiao Zhao, hide to the side first." Baihu, who had tears in her eyes, looked up at Yi Fan and immediately understood. After retreating 70 to 80 feet, the white fox came to a stop. She looked at Yi Fan again. He slowly extended his right hand, then flipped it with his palm facing the sky. Rumble! Rumble! The small island began to shake violently. Plop, plop, plop! The violent tremors of the small island startled all kinds of birds that lived here. They flew out of the dense woods and bushes, covering the sky and covering the earth. Baihu was frightened by the scene in front of her. She stared with her big clear eyes, and her 4 limbs tightly grasped the shaking ground. Her face was full of disbelief. If it wasn't for Yi Fan's warning, she would have thought that there was an earthquake. She would never have thought that Yi Fan would have such powerful strength at this time. As the ground shook more and more violently, Baihu couldn't take it anymore. She got up bravely, trotted, and jumped directly onto Yi Fan's shoulder. Only there would she feel completely safe. Rumble, rumble, as Yi Fan's right palm gradually rose, the thick tombstone began to collapse. The semicircular tombstone also began to crack along with the shaking of the ground. In the blink of an eye, the tombstone that was still intact a moment ago was shaken into countless pieces by Yi Fan's strength. Yi Fan's eyes were red and he continued to raise his right palm. Walala, countless broken pieces of stone slowly floated up from the ground, straight into the air. At this time, Yi Fan's silver hair was slowly lifted into the air by this force, and the beautiful black robe on his body was also fluttering in the wind, making fluttering sounds. Baihu used all 4 of its claws to hold tightly onto Yi Fan's shoulder, afraid that it would also float into the air. Amidst the falling pieces of stone, a huge crystal-clear ice coffin broke out of the cracked tombstone and slowly floated up. Inside the crystal-clear ice coffin, Akatsuki, whose face was covered with a red veil, had her eyes closed. Her skin was pale, and her hands were folded in front of her chest, as if she was asleep. Seeing that the cold chi ice coffin that he had set up was still there, Yi Fan felt as if a rock had been lifted from his heart. Fortunately, the ice coffin was not damaged, and the body inside was intact. Otherwise, 4 days of time, in addition to the humid island, would be enough to rot any body. Woo! After seeing Akatsuki's ice coffin, Baihu, who was standing on Yi Fan's shoulder, whimpered. When the ice coffin floated more than 3 feet above the ground, Yi Fan's feet left the ground, and he slowly floated up into the air. He lifted the huge ice coffin with both hands and placed it on his shoulder. At the same time, he retracted his strength. Walala, as Yi Fan retracted his strength, the falling pieces of stone that were floating in the air suddenly fell to the ground. Boom! 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 Large and small pieces of stone stirred up a lot of dust on the ground. After the dust settled, Yi Fan, who was carrying the ice coffin, slowly landed on the ground. He placed the ice coffin flat, and then pressed his hand on the ice coffin. He mobilized the heat of the Dragon Ball in his body and began to release the heat. Chi. Under the overbearing heat of the Dragon Ball, the ice coffin began to gradually melt, and Akatsuki's body soon appeared in front of Yi Fan. After the ice coffin melted, Yi Fan's heat still did not stop. At this time, Akatsuki's body was bone-chillingly cold, and her body was surrounded by water vapor. The red robe on her body was completely soaked, and her tall and graceful figure was undoubtedly revealed. Yi Fan wanted to use the heat to dry her clothes and also to completely force out the cold from her body. With a burst of dense water vapor rising, Akatsuki's red robe gradually became dry, and the cold in her body was also driven out by the heat of the Dragon Ball. Yi Fan saw that the preparation was almost done, and he carried Akatsuki by the waist and placed her on a piece of dry grass. After everything was ready, Yi Fan reached out and gently lifted a corner of the red veil on Akatsuki's chin. He was going to use his blood essence to inject into Akatsuki's 5 viscera and 6 bowels to restore their normal functions. Then, he would inject his blood essence into Akatsuki's blood vessels, and use his aura to completely stimulate the circulation. In this way, he would be able to resurrect Akatsuki. Yi Fan originally wanted to only lift the veil on Akatsuki's mouth, and leave the rest as it was. After all, he had to respect each other's privacy. However, as the saying goes, there is no story without coincidence. The moment Yi Fan lifted the veil on Akatsuki's mouth, a gust of sea breeze instantly blew past Yi Fan, and the entire veil on Akatsuki's face was completely blown off. When Akatsuki's true appearance was revealed in front of Yi Yi Fan was so shocked that his pupils instantly shrank, and he almost screamed out loud. The Akatsuki in front of him had eyebrows like emerald feathers, skin like cream, an apricot face, rosy cheeks, and dark hair. She was exactly the same as his wife, Fujiwara no Chiko. Plop! Yi Fan, who was in a daze, fell to the ground on his butt. He could not believe that everything in front of him was real. He was not the only one who was shocked. When she saw Akatsuki's true appearance, Baihu Xiao Zhao almost fell off Yi Fan's shoulder. What is going on? Yi Fan cried out involuntarily. All this time, he only thought that Akatsuki's eyes were like his wife. He never expected that she was exactly the same as his wife. Why was it like this? Could it be that Akatsuki's corpse was swapped out by Matsumoto Takeyoshi? He felt that his mind was a little muddled. It couldn't be. Yi Fan immediately rejected this idea. Matsumoto Takeyoshi might have the ability to make a corpse look like his wife, but it was impossible for him to replicate his own cold aura. The ice coffin that he set up was condensed from the cold aura of the ice snake's core. That Matsumoto Takeyoshi, no matter how powerful he was, would not have the ability to do so. This person was undoubtedly Akatsuki. Maybe it was a coincidence. The world was so big, it was not strange for people to look exactly the same. Yi Fan comforted himself. The most important thing now was to save her as soon as possible. Yi Fan thought as his left hand turned into a knife, and slashed across his right wrist. Swish! A blood mark appeared on Yi Fan's wrist, and dark red blood immediately flowed out. He placed his wrist beside Akatsuki's mouth, and the blood flowed from Akatsuki's mouth into her body. When Baihu saw this, it immediately opened its eyes wide and stretched out its claws to stop Yi Fan. It could lose anyone, but it could not lose Yi Fan. Chapter 565. As the blood essence from Yi Fan's wrist flowed into Akatsuki's internal organs, Akatsuki's body temperature began to rise. Her pale face also began to regain some color. At this time, her internal organs had begun to recover. Seeing this, Yi Fan continued to pour blood into Akatsuki's body from his right wrist. He stretched out his left hand and pointed it at her chest. Pa. After a few flashes of green light, Yi Fan forcefully opened several of Akatsuki's major acupuncture points. What he needed to do next was to use the power of the demon spirit to stimulate the blood essence into Akatsuki's blood vessels. Whoosh! Yi Fan stretched out his left hand and stimulated the power of the demon spirit. Buzz! His left palm, which had been swirling with green energy a moment ago, suddenly exploded with light and turned into a red palm of light. Yi Fan placed his palm on Akatsuki's chest and began to stimulate the power of the blood demon. Whoosh! Yi Fan closed his eyes. Countless strands of red light as thin as hair poured down from Yi Fan's palm and directly entered Akatsuki's chest. They slowly spread along her meridians and traveled throughout her body. Buzz! As the blood essence continued to travel to her limbs and meridians, Akatsuki's body began to emit a layer of soft red light. When this layer of red light completely enveloped Akatsuki, Yi Fan opened his eyes and a red light appeared in his eyes. Buzz! A dazzling red light circle was instantly emitted from his palm and quickly spread across Akatsuki's body. He wanted to use the power of the blood demon to stimulate Akatsuki's heart and circulate all the blood in her body. Countless rays of red light shot out from Yu Hongji's body in all directions, illuminating the ground within 3 feet of her in a red light. Yi Fan slowly removed his wrist from Akatsuki's mouth. Everything had been completed. What he had to do now was wait for Akatsuki's blood and chi to fuse and come back to life. Looking at the woman in front of him who looked exactly like his wife, Yi Fan had all kinds of feelings in his heart, but he couldn't describe them. They had the same appearance, the same care for him, and the same deep affection. He didn't know if this was a gift from the heavens or a punishment. Cough, cough, cough. Just as Yi Fan was letting his imagination run wild, Akatsuki, who was lying on the hay, started coughing softly. Hongji! Hongji! When Yi Fan saw that Akatsuki had come back from the dead, his face lit up with joy. Akatsuki slowly opened her eyes. Bufan-kun? In the instant that Akatsuki saw Yi Fan, she immediately sat up and asked, "Why are you here?" Yi Fan prepared to explain to her. "Where is this? Are we in the underworld?" Akatsuki interrupted Yi Fan and asked in an urgent voice. She thought that Yi Fan hadn't been saved by Nieqing and had gone to the underworld with her. "This isn't the underworld, this is the East Sea." Yi Fan reached out and tucked a lock of Akatsuki's hair behind her ear as he said with heartache. "East Sea," Akatsuki said as she looked around with her beautiful eyes. After seeing the boundless sea, Akatsuki finally believed that she hadn't died. She was still alive and was still together with Yi Fan. Woo! Seeing that Akatsuki had come back from the dead, Baihu immediately jumped into Akatsuki's arms and stuck out her pink tongue to lick Akatsuki's cheek. "Xiao Zhao." Akatsuki stroked Baihu's fur and said happily, "It's so good to be alive." Especially when she was with the man she loved. Akatsuki felt as if it was a lifetime ago. However, she soon felt that something was wrong. How could Baihu have licked her cheek? "Where's her veil?" Akatsuki thought as she reached out and touched her face. Her smooth face was empty. Akatsuki was shocked and her beautiful eyes opened wide. Her veil was gone. Hugging the white fox in her arms, she blushed and turned around. Her heart was beating wildly, thumping wildly. From childhood to adulthood, other than her master Kyoichi Kamaya, no one had ever seen her face. "Just now, in order to save you, I had no choice but to use my essence blood to feed you." Yi Fan saw Akatsuki turn around and immediately said with embarrassment, "Who knew that when I lifted the veil on your mouth, a gust of sea wind would blow over and the result was..." "Excuses," Akatsuki, whose face was red, whispered while stroking Baihu. Although she said that, she was actually a little happy in her heart. Yi Fan was speechless. Blown away by the wind, this really sounded like a fabricated lie. "Wait a minute, you used your essence blood to feed me?" Akatsuki suddenly recovered. In her mouth, there was indeed a strong smell of blood. Thinking of this, Akatsuki suddenly turned around and grabbed Yi Fan's right hand and pulled back his long sleeve. On Yi Fan's wrist, there was a scarlet line, the blood on it had not yet dried. Seeing the wound, Akatsuki's tears flowed down uncontrollably. "Are you crazy? Do you want to die?" Akatsuki, whose eyes were red, asked Yi Fan loudly while choking with sobs. "Look at me, am I not alive and well?" Yi Fan wiped Akatsuki's tears and roughly told her what had happened later. He only told her that he had turned into a demon, became the Demon King, and brought Umoji out of the demon realm. "Turned into a demon? You turned into a demon?" Akatsuki could hardly believe her ears after hearing this. She stared at Yi Fan with a pair of beautiful eyes, her face full of disbelief. She had heard her master Shangu Qing mention this before, and she had also read about it in some ancient books. She had originally thought that those were just imaginary worlds created by the ancients. They were illusory and could not be taken seriously. Now that she had seen the swastika written upside down between Yi Fan's brows with her own eyes, she finally understood the authenticity of this matter. "Then you're a demon now?" Akatsuki asked Yi Fan with a curious expression. "What? Are you afraid that I'll swallow you?" Yi Fan turned to Akatsuki with a smile. Akatsuki pursed her lips and smiled. She didn't care what Yi Fan was, as long as she could be with him, she was satisfied. Akatsuki's smile stunned Yi Fan. He felt as if he could see his wife beside him. "Were you shocked when you saw my appearance?" Akatsuki asked Yi Fan. "Yes." Yi Fan said, "I was so scared that I sat on the ground." "Ha ha ha." Akatsuki covered her mouth and laughed loudly. "Don't laugh, Matsumoto Takeyoshi has already buried you on this island for 3 or 4 days, so you should save some energy." Yi-fan said with a smile. I was buried here? 3 or 4 days. Akatsuki stopped laughing and asked in surprise. I just dug you out of the grave. Yi-fan said to Akatsuki with a smile. If I hadn't frozen you in ice, you would have already rotted away by now. Akatsuki was stunned. Be content, thank goodness Matsumoto Takeyoshi didn't bury you at sea, otherwise, you would have already become fish food. Yi-fan said with a smile. If I was eaten by fish, what would you do? Akatsuki asked Yi-fan half jokingly and half seriously. I would be very sad. Yi-fan looked into Akatsuki's eyes and said. Akatsuki blushed and turned her head away. Rumble embarrassed, Akatsuki's stomach made a rumbling sound. She hadn't eaten for several days, and she had lost all her blood, so her stomach was naturally empty. Are you hungry? Yi-fan asked with a smile. Akatsuki nodded her head like a chick pecking at rice. I knew you would be hungry, Yi-fan said with a smile. Before coming here, I specially brought back a tray of meat buns for you. Really? Akatsuki turned her head and asked. Put on your veil, I'll take you back to eat, Yi-fan said as he handed the red veil to Akatsuki, then picked up Baihu and placed her on his shoulder. Akatsuki put on her veil. Whoosh! With a wave of Yi-fan's sleeve, the two people and the fox instantly disappeared into thin air. Akatsuki only felt the things in front of her flash by, and before she could ask anything, the two people and the fox suddenly appeared on the deck of the battleship. They had covered the distance of 300 kilometers in the blink of an eye. What kind of movement skill was this? Could this be Yi-fan's strength after he turned into a demon? Akatsuki was stunned. Go say hello to Matsumoto Takeyoshi, I'll wait for you on the ship. The black-robed Yi-fan smiled at the stupefied Akatsuki. He instantly disappeared and appeared on the deck of the small ship, slowly walking into the ship. At the entrance of Matsumoto Takeyoshi's cabin, the two ninjas guarding the door looked at everything in front of them in shock, as if they were in a dream. They were no longer shocked by Yi-fan's movement skill, but by Yi-fan's special ability. The two had seen with their own eyes the ice coffin containing Akatsuki's corpse being carried away by several ninjas on a small boat. Now Yi-fan had only been in Matsumoto Takeyoshi's cabin for less than an hour, and Akatsuki was standing in front of them alive. Could this Yi-fan be the incarnation of the Grim Reaper? He could bring someone who had been dead for 3 to 4 days back to life. If it wasn't for the clear sky and the long shadow behind Akatsuki, they would have thought that the person in front of them was Akatsuki's soul. Miss Suki. Seeing Akatsuki come to the cabin door, the two ninjas immediately nodded and saluted to Akatsuki. Is Mr. Matsumoto here? Akatsuki asked. Replying to Miss Suki, Mr. Matsumoto is inside. One of the ninjas lowered his head and said, I'll have to trouble the two of you to help me pass the message. Akatsuki said to the ninjas. Yes. The ninjas answered, turned around and gently knocked on the door. Mr. Matsumoto, Miss Suki is back. The ninjas said. Let her in. There was a moment of silence in the cabin, followed by Matsumoto Takeyoshi's voice. Obviously, Matsumoto Takeyoshi was shocked by Akatsuki's resurrection. Voila! The ninjas slid the wooden door open, and Akatsuki stepped in. The moment they saw Akatsuki, Matsumoto Takeyoshi and the white-clothed man could hardly believe their eyes. What level of cultivation did this Yi-fan reach? He actually had the ability to resurrect a dead person who was buried for 3 or 4 days. If he could resurrect a dead person, then wouldn't he already have an immortal body? Greetings to Mr. Matsumoto. Akatsuki lowered her head and saluted Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Please get up quickly. Please get up quickly. Matsumoto Takeyoshi quickly said to Akatsuki. Akatsuki got up. Miss Suki being able to resurrect from the dead is Matsumoto's fortune. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said happily. Thank you, Mr. Matsumoto. Akatsuki said, Mr. Matsumoto, if there's nothing else, I'd like to go down and rest. Okay, Miss Suki should go back and rest for a few days. Your body is more important, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. Akatsuki nodded to Matsumoto Takeyoshi and turned to leave. Chapter 566. Inside the cabin, Akatsuki, who had removed her veil, was wolfing down the meat bun that Yi Fan had brought back for her. Eat slowly, no one is fighting with you, Yi Fan urged Akatsuki to eat slowly as he poured her a cup of tea. Akatsuki took the tea and gulped down a few mouthfuls before continuing to eat her meat bun. She had not eaten for 4 days and was famished. Rest well after you're done eating, Yi Fan said to Akatsuki, who was wolfing down her food. I'm going out for a bit. I'll be back soon. Akatsuki, whose mouth was stuffed with meat bun, immediately looked up at Yi Fan. Where are you going? Akatsuki asked. I'm going to return a wish. I'll be back in 2 hours at most, Yi Fan said to Akatsuki. I'm going too, Akatsuki said as she put down her meat bun and wiped her mouth. You've just come back from the dead and your blood energy has not completely merged. Your soul has only just stabilized, so it's not suitable for you to go out. You should rest here for a day, Yi Fan said. I'll take you out tomorrow. Tomorrow? Akatsuki asked. Where are we going tomorrow? There are too many things to do right now, Yi Fan said to Akatsuki with a smile. I'll tell you about it when I get back, Yi Fan said as he picked up Baihu and stood up. Then be careful, Akatsuki reminded Yi Fan. Yi Fan nodded with a smile as he stood up. With a wave of his sleeve, he disappeared into thin air thousands of miles away, Mount Jinping. Inside the cave, Li Si, who was dressed in tattered green clothes, was eating wild fruits with the white crane. Although the days were tough, the man and the crane still helped each other out. Whoosh! A ray of green light fell from the clouds and shot straight into the cave. Buzz! After the azure light faded, the black-robed, silver-haired Yi Fan appeared in front of Li Si. Mr. Yi. Li Si, who was holding half a wild fruit in his hand, looked at Yi Fan in front of him. He was so shocked that he couldn't even speak properly. Yi Fan almost couldn't believe his eyes when he saw the green swastika written upside down between his eyebrows. Yi Fan had turned into a demon. Moreover, he still retained his humanity. Li Si exclaimed inwardly. What was even more inconceivable to him was that Yi Fan's body was actually shrouded in an extremely overbearing evil aura. This evil aura was so strong that even the devil spirit on his body couldn't contend against it. Yi Fan smiled and nodded at Li Si. Upon seeing Yi Fan, the white crane standing behind Reese immediately let out a high-pitched cry. It flapped its snow-white wings and used its slender and sharp beak to stab towards Yi Fan. When enemies met, their eyes blazed with hatred. It still remembered clearly the last time Yi Fan had used an ice shield to cover Li Si and knocked him unconscious. Schwer! Seeing this, Li Si immediately shouted for the white crane. However, the white crane's movements were too fast. The moment Li Si shouted, the white crane, which was 3 feet above the ground, had already rushed in front of Yi Fan. It stretched its neck and stabbed its long beak towards Yi Fan's chest. Yi Fan smiled and stood with his hands behind his back, completely unguarded. At the same time, he withdrew all the spiritual energy in his body and the blood demon's power from his primordial spirit. Bang! After a loud sound, the white crane's long beak pierced Yi Fan's chest. Thump, 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 thump. Yi Fan was forced back 5 steps by the white crane's huge force before he could stabilize himself. If it weren't for the 8 treasures brocade robe on him, the white crane's attack would have left a bloody hole in his chest. The white crane was confused by the scene in front of it. Last time, this young man was able to stun it with a casual attack. Now that it was attacking him with all its might, he was completely unprepared. The white crane tilted its head and blinked its small, sparkling eyes as it looked at Yi Fan in confusion. Schwerer, don't be rude. Li Si shouted as he quickly walked in front of Yi Fan and reached out to help Yi Fan. Mr. Yi, are you okay? Li Si asked anxiously. He clearly saw the moment Yi Fan withdrew his spiritual energy. Because in that instant, the swastika written in reverse on Yi Fan's forehead instantly dimmed. Yi Fan smiled and waved his hand, indicating that he was fine. Bastard, how can you not recognize Mr. Yi? You deserve a beating. Li Si turned around and scolded the white crane as he raised his hand high, ready to hit it. The white crane lowered its head and prepared to be punished. Slap! Just as Li Si's hand was about to fall, Yi Fan reached out and grabbed it. Master Li Shui was just trying to protect its master, Yi Fan said to Li Si. Last time, I offended you and hurt Shui. Today, I got stabbed by it, so I deserved it. You can't blame Shui. Li Si was stunned. He instantly understood why Yi Fan withdrew his spiritual energy. Under Li Si's shocked gaze, Yi Fan slowly walked in front of the white crane and reached out to touch the top of its head. The white crane took a step back, then bravely stood still and allowed Yi Fan to touch it. I hit you with a palm and you stabbed me with your beak. We're even now, okay? Yi Fan said with a smile as he touched the top of the crane's head. The white crane was stunned. It raised its head and looked at Yi Fan. Shui, the master is asking you a question, Li Si said to the white crane. After the white crane heard this, it lowered its head and bowed towards Yi Fan. It understood human nature and understood why Yi Fan did what he did. Yi Fan smiled knowingly. Master, please take a seat. Li Si gestured for Yi Fan to sit down. There's no need for that. Yi Fan turned around and said to Li Si. I'm here for the master's Naiwen Palace. Naiwen Palace? Li Si's eyes lit up. He said in shock, could it be that you can? I already have the power of the sanguine demon. Even if I want to reconstruct my flesh, it'll be a piece of cake, Yi Fan said to Li Si with a smile. It's just the Naiwen Palace. It's a piece of cake. Thank you, master. When he heard Yi Fan's words, Li Si immediately knelt in front of Yi Fan. He sobbed as he spoke with tears in his eyes. For so many years, he had endured humiliation in order to be able to remove the seal and repair his mud-pill palace. He had hoped to wash away all the sins in his body and cultivate Tao anew, returning to the path of righteousness. Now that his wish was about to be fulfilled, how could he not be excited? You don't have to be so courteous. Please get up. Yi Fan helped Li Si up from his kneeling position and said, please sit down. I'll help you remove the seal and repair your Naiwen Palace. Li Si nodded with tears in his eyes. He got up and walked to the front of the praying mat. He sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. It might hurt a little. Master, please bear with it, Yi Fan said as he walked behind Li Si. Master, please do as you wish. I can take it, Li Si replied. All right, Yi Fan nodded and said, I'll begin then. As Yi Fan spoke, his right hand gently pressed on Li Si's head. Li Si looked at his nose and calmed his heart. He cleared his mind and cleared his mind. Buzz. As Yi Fan used the power of the devil spirit, a red light was emitted from his palm. It illuminated the ceiling of the cave above Li Si's head in red light. Buzz, buzz, buzz. 5 red electric lights were emitted from Yi Fan's fingertips and rushed into Li Si's head. Li Si frowned as beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. He felt that the 5 overbearing electric lights had touched the seal on his Naiwen Palace. Yi Fan slowly closed his eyes and sensed Li Si's incomplete Naiwen Palace, as well as the golden seal that was suppressing it. The golden seal contained many overbearing Taoist powers. It was obvious that many Taoist experts had worked together to cast it. Everything was as Li Si had said. Instead of saying that the experts were sealing his Naiwen Palace, it was more accurate to say that they were destroying his Naiwen Palace. At this moment, 70% of his Naiwen Palace was completely destroyed. The remaining 30% was like a beehive. Yi Fan controlled the 5 red electric lights with his mind and slowly inserted them into the gap between the Naiwan Palace and the Golden Seal. He wanted to use the 5 electric lights to completely entangle the seal before uprooting it. Ugh! Li Si groaned in pain. Large beads of sweat rolled down his forehead like rain. Master, bear with it. I'm going to remove the seal, Yi Fan said to Li Si after the 5 red electric lights had completely entangled the seal. Li Si reached for a branch of a wild fruit and bit on it. Yi Fan opened his eyes and slowly raised his hand that was pressing on Li Si's head. Buzz, 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 as Yi Fan slowly raised his palm, 5 dazzling bolts of red lightning began to rise from Li Si's head. Creak. The branch in Li Si's mouth made creaking sounds. The excruciating pain almost made him faint. Buzz, 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 just as the 5 red lights were about to leave his head, dozens of golden lights shot out from the top of Li Si's head. Following that, a palm-sized, irregular golden ball of light covered in blood slowly rose up. The seal had been removed by Yi Fan with the power of the blood demon. Ugh! Li Si's face was pale. The branch in his mouth was almost broken. Yi Fan slowly retracted the electric lights and held the golden ball of light in his hand. Then, he clenched his 5 fingers. Bang! The golden ball of light exploded in Yi Fan's hand. Countless golden light fragments fell from the sky. It was a beautiful sight. The seal had been removed, but his Naiwan Palace had yet to be repaired. Li Si's consciousness started to fade. If it wasn't for his many years of meditation that allowed him to keep his body motionless, he would have already collapsed. The seal had been in his body for many years and had long been connected to his Naiwan Palace. Now that it had been removed by Yi Fan, the balance had been broken. If he wasn't treated in time, he would definitely die. After Yi Fan destroyed the golden seal, he immediately pressed his palm on Li Si's head again. At the same time, he activated the demonic spirit in his primordial spirit and the 5-colored spiritual energy in his energy reserve. The blood-red electric light appeared again and the 5-colored electric light appeared. The 2 powerful forces rushed into Li Si's Naiwan Palace and started to repair it at a speed visible to the naked eye. The power of the blood demon was used to repair the shape of the Naiwan Palace. The 5-colored spiritual energy was used to stimulate the blood in the Naiwan Palace and restore its normal functions. The 2 forces each had their own roles and abilities. After a short while, Yi Fan slowly retracted the spiritual energy in his hand. Li Si slowly opened his eyes. He tried to use the chaotic spiritual energy in his energy reserve to complete a large and small cycle. He realized that his Naiwan Palace had been completely repaired and it was even smoother than before it was sealed. Li Si's eyes widened in disbelief. I used the power of the blood demon to help you rebuild your Naiwan Palace. I also used the spiritual energy from the Xian Tian secret technique to open up the meridians in your brain. From now on, you can focus on cultivating qi without any worries. Yi Fan's voice came from behind him. Mister, you have saved my life. Li Si is extremely grateful, Li Si said emotionally as he turned around and prepared to thank Yi Fan. But when he turned around, he realized that Yi Fan was no longer in front of him. He was stunned for a moment before he turned around and ran to the entrance of the cave. He cupped his hands over his eyes and looked up at the sky. He saw a dazzling green light flash above the clouds. Then, it turned into a dazzling star and disappeared. Chapter 567. From the time they left the East Sea to the distant Mount Jinping, from removing the seal on Li Si's body to repairing his mud-pill palace to returning to the East Sea, Yi Fan had used less than an hour to do all of this. Whoosh! After a burst of azure light, a smiling Yi Fan appeared in the cabin, scaring Akatsuki so much that she almost dropped the teacup in her hand. You scared me to death, Akatsuki said to Yi Fan with a pale expression as she patted her chest. Yi Fan's current cultivation had far exceeded her imagination. In the past, no matter how fast Yi Fan's movement techniques were, he would still have to open the cabin door to enter. But now, Yi Fan didn't need to do such tedious things. He could appear and disappear in an instant. He could pass through rooms and rooms like a ghost. You just came back to life, so don't die again, Yi Fan said with a smile as he sat down across from Akatsuki. Baihu jogged over and jumped into Yi Fan's arms. Are you done? Akatsuki asked Yi Fan as she poured tea for Yi Fan. I'm done, Yi Fan said with a smile as he caressed Baihu. So fast. Akatsuki handed the fragrant tea to Yi Fan. That's considered slow, Yi Fan said with a smile as he took a sip of the tea. He had already broken through the first seal. After unsealing it, his strength was so strong that even the heavenly demon's power, which could contend against immortals, was suppressed. At this moment, rather than saying that Yi Fan possessed the heavenly demon's power, it would be more appropriate to say that he possessed the sinister demon's power. The mysterious heaven secrets, the proud moon heavenly scripture, the power of the heavenly demon, and the unsealing of the evil spirit. For the first time ever, these four powers were concentrated on Yi Fan alone. The Frost Dragon Sword, the Fleeting Flame Sword, and the Blood Drinker Saber were miraculously in Yi Fan's possession. Since ancient times, if Yi Fan claimed to be the second person to have such a bizarre encounter, no one would dare to claim to be the first. What he said just now was not boasting. With his current cultivation, an hour was indeed very slow. What are we doing today? Akatsuki asked Yi Fan. Eat, sleep, rest, daydream. Yi Fan smiled and laid down lazily on the wooden floor. He rested his head on his hands and said with a smile, Do whatever you want. Akatsuki smiled. What about tomorrow? Where are we going tomorrow? Tomorrow we will go to Sisui first, and then to Fire Dragon Town, Yi Fan said with a smile with his eyes closed. Akatsuki nodded her head slightly. The intelligent her had already understood Yi Fan's purpose. His current cultivation was no longer the same as before. The divine cauldron barrier should not be a problem for him any more. In the blink of an eye, it was night time. Just as night fell, the originally calm East Sea suddenly had a sea breeze blowing. Huge waves surged into the sky, lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, and rain poured down. The small boat was faintly discernible in the stormy waves, shaking violently. Inside the cabin, the copper chandelier swayed. The flames were both bright and dark, stretching and shortening Yi Fan's shadow. Baihu Xiao Zhao could not stand the shaking of the boat, and was also most afraid of this kind of extreme weather. It curled up its fluffy snow-white body and buried its head in Yi Fan's embrace, unwilling to come out. Yi Fan, who was stroking Baihu, raised his head to look at the flickering copper chandelier and listened to the sound of the waves hitting the side of the boat. A smile appeared on his handsome face. According to Li Si, this was the best time to find the divine cauldron in the sea. Thinking of this, Yi Fan hugged Baihu and blew out the flame on the copper chandelier. Then, with a wave of his sleeve, he disappeared instantly. Whoosh! Above the clouds 50 kilometers away, Yi Fan, who was wearing a black robe, appeared out of thin air. Under his feet, black clouds rolled, thunder rumbled, and countless purple lightning bolts shuttled back and forth. It was a spectacular sight. On the surface of the sea under the black clouds, black waves rolled and torrential rain poured down. Between heaven and earth there was a thunderstorm. Whoosh! Yi Fan, who was hugging Baihu, used his long sleeve to wave at the black clouds under his feet. Whoosh! A gust of wind was suddenly released from Yi Fan's sleeve, tearing a huge hole in the endless black clouds under his feet. Buzz! As Yi Fan activated the devil spirit, 2 dazzling rays of red light shot out from his eyes and shot directly toward the surface of the sea that was 30,000 meters below them. When the red lights shot out from Yi Fan's eyes, they were only as thick as a thumb. By the time they reached the surface of the sea, they had expanded to a size of several hundred meters. The 2 huge circular red lights swept back and forth on the surface of the sea at an extremely fast speed. He was looking for a calm sea. This method of searching was much more efficient than when he was looking for the soul-returning grass in the extreme north. At that time, he had to lower his altitude and release his spiritual energy in a large area. He also had to constantly change his position. Now, he didn't need to go through so much trouble. With the power of the heavenly demon, he only needed to move his eyes, and he could see everything as far as his eyes could see. Every time he swept his eyes, he would scan the sea within a radius of several thousand meters. In the blink of an eye, he had checked the sea under his feet. Whoosh! Yifan used his movement technique and disappeared into thin air. Once again, he appeared 100 miles away. Once again, he used the same trick and scanned the sea surface. In the cabin of the battleship, Matsumoto Takeyoshi and the white-robed man were sitting cross-legged on a praying mat, facing each other with their eyes closed. The 3-foot-tall, 500-kilogram soul congregation evil cauldron was placed between the two of them. It was shrouded in green light and had a strange aura. The blood-eye toad with the skull in its mouth and blood-red eyes was facing Matsumoto Takeyoshi, its eyes flashing red. "Yamada-kun, are you ready?" Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked the white-robed man on the praying mat with his eyes closed. "Mr. Matsumoto, let's begin." The white-robed man opposite him closed his eyes and replied, "Okay." Matsumoto Takeyoshi said and immediately opened his eyes. Buzz! With a thought from Matsumoto Takeyoshi, countless dazzling green lights shot out from the soul congregation evil cauldron, illuminating the entire cabin. Whoosh! Matsumoto Takeyoshi stretched out his right hand, facing the evil cauldron with a single palm. Rumble! The bronze skull in the blood-eye toad's mouth began to spin at high speed. The sound was soul-shaking and extremely sharp. Buzz! At the same time, the blood-eye toad's blood-red eyes suddenly burst with red light. Whoosh! Matsumoto Takeyoshi turned his right hand, palm facing the sky. Buzz! The red light burst out and gradually enveloped the blood-eye toad's entire body. On the back of the blood-eye toad, the dense mysterious runes were even more dazzling red, as if they were red and blood. Matsumoto Takeyoshi slowly raised his hand. Croak! After a loud and clear croak, the blood-eye toad began to raise its head, bloody mouth facing the sky, and the bronze skull in its mouth began to spin faster. "100 demons, come out of the cauldron and listen to my command," Matsumoto Takeyoshi shouted softly, his right hand curling into a claw. Clang! The high-speed spinning skull in the blood-eye toad's mouth suddenly stopped. Buzz! Hundreds of dazzling lights of different colors came out of the skull's 7 orifices and condensed into a 5-colored rope in the air, not dissipating. 100 demons in the body! Matsumoto Takeyoshi saw that the 100 demons were condensing and immediately pointed at the 5-colored rope in the air with his sword finger, controlling the spirits of the 100 demons to fall towards the white-robed man whose eyes were slightly closed. Whoosh! The 5-colored rope followed Matsumoto Takeyoshi's hand gesture and came to the top of the white-robed man's head, winding through his Baihui acupoint. Buzz! When the 5-colored rope completely entered the white-robed man's body, thousands of rays of 5-colored light were released from the white-robed man's body. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's face lit up with joy, and he withdrew his thoughts. The soul congregation evil cauldron's brilliance retracted and returned to normal. The brilliance that enveloped the white-robed man's body also began to dissipate gradually. When the brilliance on the white-robed man's body dissipated, Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled and asked, "Mr. Yamada, how does it feel to have 100 demons in your body?" "It feels very good," the white-robed man said as he slowly opened his eyes. Whoosh! A ray of 5-colored brilliance flashed through the white-robed man's eyes, and then disappeared. Within the 100 demons there are those that fly in the sky, those that run on the ground, and those that swim in the water. There are all kinds of demons. The lowest cultivation is more than 800 years old. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled and said to the white-robed man, Mr. Yamada's current strength can be said to be incomparable to the past. Mr. Yamada thanks Mr. Matsumoto. The white-robed man bowed and bowed to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. He now had the power of 100 demons in his body, and his strength was close to that of a demon immortal. Compared to before, it could be said that there was a world of difference. Mr. Yamada, now that you have obtained the power of 100 demons, your cultivation has skyrocketed. It is really worthy of celebration, but there is one thing that you must pay attention to. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said to the white-robed man, although the power of 100 demons has been forcibly extracted and injected into Mr. Yamada's body, their primordial spirits still exist, and there will be resentment in their hearts. When this resentment accumulates to a certain extent, Mr. Yamada will be attacked by the resentment of 100 demons. The resentment of 100 demons? The white-robed man raised his eyebrows and asked after hearing this. That's right. Matsumoto Takeyoshi replied. The power of 100 demons is extremely overbearing. The power of its backlash naturally can't be underestimated. Is there a way to deal with it? The white-robed man asked. Of course there is. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled and said, these 100 demons have yin and yang, good and evil. Using yin to counter yang, and using good to eliminate evil. As long as Mr. Yamada makes good use of this, there will naturally be no problem. The white-robed man understood tacitly and slowly nodded. Although this Matsumoto Takeyoshi had no cultivation, he was clear and logical when it came to the cultivation method. With this person's mental strength and wisdom, if he concentrated on cultivation, he would definitely be an extraordinary person. I wonder if with Mr. Yamada's current cultivation, you can compete with Yifan? Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he picked up the fragrant tea on the wooden table beside him and gently took a sip. It's hard to say, the white-robed man calmly replied. I don't know much about the demon realm, and I know very little about the power of the heavenly demon recorded in the ancient books. Unless I really fight with Yifan, it will be very difficult to know the result. Ha ha! Matsumoto Takeyoshi laughed and said, Mr. Yamada, don't worry. This day will eventually come. It's only a matter of time. After hearing this, the white-robed man did not reply. Chapter 568. Above the black clouds, the black-robed, silver-haired, black-robed Yifan continued to observe the sea below with his bloodshot eyes. Two huge blood-red pillars of light connected the sky and the sea, constantly scanning the vast sea. In this night of heavy rain, it was extremely spectacular. At this time, he had been searching in the East Sea for more than 6 hours, and the sea area he had searched was more than 10,000 feet wide. Even so, he still didn't find any calm sea. The East Sea was really too big. However, Yifan didn't give up. If he couldn't find it this time, he would look for it next time. With his current searching speed, he would be able to search the entire East Sea in 7 or 8 stormy nights. At that time, he would naturally find the whereabouts of the East Sea Divine Cauldron. Yifan calculated the time and knew that it was getting late. It was time to go back. It was almost dawn. He couldn't delay the 3 divine cauldrons in Fire Dragon Town, Sisui River, and Changbai Mountain. Thinking of this, Yifan immediately recalled the blood demon spirit. Then, with a flick of his sleeve, he turned into a green light and flew over the black clouds, rushing in the direction of the warship 800 miles away. Whoosh! Before Baihu could blink her eyes, Yifan's figure appeared in the cabin out of thin air. He put down the white fox and sat down on the floor. He poured 2 cups of tea from the teapot and placed 1 cup in front of the white fox, Xiao Zhao, while he drank the other cup himself. Buzz! Just as he was gulping down the water, the blood-red blood devil token tied to his waist instantly emitted a soft red light. Yifan was stunned. He quickly put down the teacup and stood up. After returning to the human world, he had been thinking about saving Akatsuki. He had almost forgotten that his lover from his previous life was still living in the blood demon token. After taking off the blood demon token and placing it in the palm of his hand, Yi Fan stretched out his right hand and gently brushed it. Buzz! As Yi Fan stroked it lightly, a dazzling red light shot out from the blood demon token, illuminating the entire cabin with a red light. Baihu Xiaozhao, who was drinking water, stopped and raised her head to look at the blood demon token in Yi Fan's hand. Her face was full of shock. It had originally thought that the blood-red jade pendant hanging on Yi Fan's body was just an ornament. It had never expected that there would be such a mystery behind it. However, what shocked it even more was yet to come. Amidst the tens of thousands of rays of red light, a beautiful woman dressed in purple slowly walked out of the light. This woman's eyebrows were like crescent moons, her eyes were like stars, her skin was like cream, and her teeth were like jade. She was like Chang-yi, a dragon lady who had descended to the mortal world. Xiao Zhao had been born for so many years, but this was the first time she had seen such a stunning beauty. Under its astonished gaze, the purple-robed woman slowly lowered her body and bowed to Yi Fan in a graceful manner. "Your subordinate greets the Demon King." The beautiful Yumoji greeted Yi Fan. This woman was called Yi Fan the Demon King? She even bowed to Yi Fan? Baihu saw this and immediately looked at Yi Fan. She vaguely understood the mystery behind it. It was obvious that Yi Fan had become a leader of the demon realm. From the way she addressed him, it was obvious that his position was extremely high and extraordinary. "Moji, I've been busy saving people ever since I came back. I almost forgot about you. Get up," Yi Fan said as he reached out to help Yumoji up. "Thank you, Demon King." Yumoji stood up. "This is the human world, not the demon realm. There's no need for all the unnecessary formalities from before." Yi Fan said to Yumoji, "Here, you're not my subordinate, and I'm not your Demon King. From now on, you can call me Yi Fan, and I'll call you Moji. Is that all right? The Demon King's position is revered. How would I dare to call you by your name?" Yumoji lowered her head and answered, "I see." Yi Fan muttered to himself as he reached out to touch his nose. "Then you can call me Mr. Yi. Is that all right?" Yumoji raised her head and looked at Yi Fan with her beautiful eyes. She gently bit her lips and nodded. "Come, let me introduce you." Yi Fan picked up Baihu as he said to Yumoji, "This is the Xiao Zhao that I mentioned to you before." Yumoji nodded at Baihu. "Xiao Zhao, this is Yumoji, one of the 4 guardians of the demon realm. She's my. Yi Fan looked up at Yumoji awkwardly as he did not know how to continue the introduction. Yumoji's face turned red as her eyes flickered. "She's an old friend of mine from my previous life. When you regain your human form, call her Sister Moji." Yi Fan brushed the matter aside. Baihu, who was in his arms, looked at Yumoji, who was blushing. She then looked up at Yi Fan, who was pretending to be nonchalant and avoiding her gaze. She understood the gist of the situation. The beautiful woman in front of her was most likely related to Eldritch. The 4 guardians of the demon realm had to bow to Yi Fan. It seemed that Yi Fan's position in the demon realm was second only to one person and above all. Xiao Zhao thought to herself as she looked at Yumoji and nodded politely. "The Demon King, oh no, Mr. Yi," Yumoji said to Yi Fan. I would like to ask, is there anything I can help you with?" As Yumoji spoke, she glanced at Baihu, who was in Yi Fan's arms. It was obvious that she had something to say to Yi Fan alone. Yi Fan naturally understood what he meant. "I don't need your help for the time being. If there's anything I need, I'll let you know," Yi Fan said to Yumoji. "In that case, I won't disturb Mr. Yi any further. I'll take my leave." As Yumoji spoke, she turned into a purple light and flew into the blood demon token in Yi Fan's hand. "Xiao Zhao, you've been following me around all night. You must be tired." Yi Fan placed Baihu on the futon and stroked Baihu's white and smooth fur. "It's still early and it's raining heavily. You should sleep for a while." We'll go out after the rain stops. Baihu nodded and put its furry tail under its head. It curled up and closed its eyes. It hadn't slept all night with Yi Fan, so it was naturally very tired. Under Yi Fan's touch, it quickly fell asleep. After covering the white fox with a blanket, Yi Fan's body flashed and disappeared into thin air. He then reappeared in another cabin downstairs in an instant. Moji, show yourself, Yi Fan said. The red light reappeared, and Yumoji emerged from it once more. What happened? Yi Fan asked Yumoji. I have to go. Yumoji looked at Yi Fan with her beautiful eyes and said with a sad expression. Leaving? Yi Fan was stunned. Where are you going? Yumoji's words surprised him. I've told you before that I don't want to be a part of the demon realm anymore. After coming to the human realm, I have no intention of returning to the demon realm, Yumoji said sadly. This time, I took the initiative to appear to bid you farewell. Aren't you in the human world now? Why are you leaving? Yi Fan asked. You're now the Devil Realm's Devil Lord. You'll definitely return to the Devil Realm in the future, Yumoji shook her head and said. While you're busy with the human world, it's reasonable for me to run away. If I run away when you return to the Devil Realm, the Devil Lord won't let me go. Where are you going? Yi Fan asked. If the Devil Lord wants to catch you, it'll be useless even if you run to the ends of the earth. He won't. Yumoji smiled sadly. If I disperse my devil soul and reincarnate, the Devil Lord won't be able to do anything. The Devil Realm can only tempt people, but they can't do anything. Disperse your devil soul and reincarnate. Yumoji's words made Yi Fan frown. He looked at Yumoji and asked in shock. Yumoji nodded, her eyes red. Are you crazy? Yi Fan said anxiously, after reincarnating, you'll have nothing but a physical body. I think being a human is pretty good. Yumoji wiped her tears and said with a smile. Men and women get married, have children, work at sunrise and rest at sunset, eat plain tea, help each other in times of need, and live a normal life. That's more practical than anything else. Yi Fan's eyes widened when he heard that. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. What, am I wrong? Yumoji asked when she saw Yi Fan shaking his head. The kind of life you're talking about is too luxurious. Not everyone can get it. Yi Fan said with a bitter smile. If I could really live like that, why would I need to enter the demonic path and become neither human nor ghost like I am now? Yumoji frowned. The two of them were silent. Don't go, Yi Fan broke the silence after a long time. He turned around with his hands behind his back and said calmly, When I'm done with the matters in the human world, I'll personally take you to Brother Devil and ask him to give you to me as the Devil Lord's wife. With this title, I can let you stay in the human world for a long time and you won't have to worry about those things anymore. Of course, this is just a title. You know, I know, and even the heavens and earth know. Hearing Yi Fan's words, Yumoji suddenly raised her head, tears glistening in her eyes. Yi Fan's words moved her inexplicably, but also made her sad. What moved her was that she could finally be together with Eldritch. What made her sad was that this was just a title. Since I've been intimate with you in my past life, I'll take good care of you in this life. This is what I owe you, Yi Fan said calmly. 2 streams of hot tears flowed from Yumoji's eyes. Before I returned to the human world, I hinted to Brother Devil about our relationship. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to bring you out so easily, Yi Fan said as he turned around. Based on this, Brother Devil will definitely agree to my request. Don't mention anything about reincarnation again. As Yi Fan spoke, he took out a white handkerchief and handed it to Yumoji. Yumoji did not take the handkerchief from Yi Fan. Her shoulders trembled as she cried. The grievances that she had suppressed in her heart for more than 300 years suddenly surged to her heart. Right now, she did not know whether to be happy or sad for herself. Happy that she had an empty title. Sad that she had become the Devil Lord's wife. You're already the Devil Lord's wife. Why are you still crying like a child? Yi Fan used the handkerchief in his hand to wipe away Yumoji's tears as he said with a smile, "You were originally a beauty in the devil world, but after crying like this, you've become an ugly woman in the human world." Yi Fan's words made Yumoji cry even harder. She opened her arms and hugged Yi Fan tightly. Chapter 569. 2 hours later, the rain above the East Sea disappeared, and the blue sky was clear. High up in the sky, Yi Fan stepped on the auspicious clouds and flew at high speed. Beside him, the beautiful Akatsuki was holding Baihu in her arms. She was dressed in white and had a smile on her face. Both of them were not wearing masks. After the recent events, the relationship between the two of them had undergone a subtle change. They seemed to have become close all of a sudden. Looking at Yuehongheim, who was dressed in snow-white clothes and had an exquisite face, Yi Fan felt as if he had returned to the time when he was flying in the sky at night with his beloved wife, Fujiwara Chiko. The two of them looked the same, had the same voice, and even had the same smile. This made Yi Fan feel as if he was in a dream. "Are we going to Sisui or Huolong Town now?" Akatsuki looked at Yi Fan with a pair of clear and pure eyes and asked. "Let's go to Huolong Town first. We'll go to Sisui River at night." Yi Fan turned his head and looked at Akatsuki and said. Akatsuki nodded. The two timings that Yi Fan had chosen were very suitable. Huolong Town was located in the southwest desert. It was hot and dry. The merchants who passed by would choose to travel at night. No one would travel under the scorching sun. This was the best time to break the barrier of the divine cauldron. Sisui River was the exact opposite. The environment there was quiet and lush. Many people would go there to play during the day. It would only be quiet at night. At that time, it would be the best time to break the barrier of the divine cauldron hidden under the water. "What about the Heaven Lake?" Akatsuki asked Yi Fan. "Fujita Tsuyoshi and Satokawa Kai have already sealed that place. Once you break the seal and enter the water to search for the cauldron, the two of them will definitely notice. Matsumoto Takeyoshi will also send experts to check it out." "So what?" Yi Fan turned his head and said with a smile while activating the auspicious clouds, "By the time he sends people there, I will have already gotten what I want. The barrier is broken, and you are not in the East Sea. With Matsumoto Takeyoshi's suspicious personality, he will definitely suspect you." Akatsuki said to Yi Fan, "Don't forget, among all the experts, only you have such strength." "Don't worry, he definitely won't suspect me," Yi Fan said as he moved his head closer to Akatsuki's ear and whispered a few words. After Akatsuki heard this, her beautiful eyes instantly widened as she looked at Yi Fan in disbelief. Yi Fan smiled mysteriously and whistled. Everything was under his control. An hour later, the two of them arrived above the southwest Great Desert. Although it was not noon yet, the sun was already scorching and the heat was unbearable. After using the cold air from the ice core in his body to envelop Akatsuki and Baihu, Yi Fan activated the auspicious clouds under his feet and slowly descended into the desert. Swoosh! When they were less than 10 feet away from the desert, Yi Fan extracted the cold air from the ice core and threw a palm strike at the scorching desert below them. Crack, crack, crack! A white beam of light was emitted from Yi Fan's palm and a huge ice block appeared above the desert. The ice block was 10 feet wide and had cold smoke rising from it. Under the illumination of the sun, it was brilliant and dazzling. The two of them and the fox slowly landed on the ice block. "Wait for me on this ice block with Xiao Zhao. I will be back soon," Yi Fan turned around and said to Akatsuki. "Okay." Akatsuki nodded. Swoosh! Yi Fan disappeared into thin air. Swoosh! In the blink of an eye, Yi Fan appeared in the center of the desert, 300 miles away. A large piece of flat sand appeared in front of him. This was the place where the divine cauldron was located. Yi Fan reached out and sucked up a handful of yellow sand from the ground and threw it at the flat sand. Swoosh! Following a series of golden flashes, the yellow sand was blocked out of the sand. Yi Fan smiled and patted the sand off his hands. The barrier was still there, which meant that the divine cauldron was still there. What he had to do next was to break the barrier and obtain the engravings of the divine cauldron. Yi Fan thought to himself and slowly retreated 30 feet. At the same time, he suddenly activated the power of the heavenly demon. Buzz. With a single thought from Yi Fan, the swastika written upside down between his brows flickered with green light and instantly turned blood red. It released 10,000 rays of red light that radiated brilliance in all directions. Boom! A huge flame shot up into the sky from Yi Fan's body. The flame was as red as blood and was dazzling. It was more than 1,000 feet tall and pierced through the clouds like a red divine sword. Bang! The flame shot up into the sky and created a huge hole in the clouds in the sky. Countless clouds scattered at high speed. In the center of the red light, a gigantic green skull appeared. The skull shone with green light and the red swastika on top of its head was a dazzling red. Its teeth protruded from its mouth and its face was ferocious. It was surrounded by evil energy and its eyes were empty. Buzz, 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 countless huge green lightning bolts shuttled back and forth in the red flame. It was extremely domineering. Yi Fan's eyes were slightly closed and he had an evil smile on his face. His black robe and silver hair fluttered and he was surrounded by a murderous aura. It was as if an evil god had descended to the mortal world. Swoosh! Yi Fan suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes shone with blood-red light and his pupils were as black as ink. Yi Fan's empty and cold eyes sent chills down one's spine. Blood Devil Prime, Heavenly Devil's Power. Yi Fan, who had an evil smile on his face, let out a low roar that was a mix of male and female voices. Roar! In the midst of the lightning bolts, the huge green skull roared toward the sky and let out a deafening roar. Whoosh! Amidst the deafening roar, a dazzling red humanoid figure of light instantly rushed out from Yi Fan's body. With a lightning-like speed, it charged towards the invisible barrier surrounding the divine cauldron. Boom! The earth trembled and a shock wave exploded. Yellow sand swirled in the air, rising straight into the air. Boom! 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 3 huge red shock waves appeared out of thin air and spread out at the speed of light. On a huge ice block 300 li away, Yu Hongji, who was hugging a white fox, almost fell off the ice block due to the tremors under her feet. Whoosh! 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 The 3 red shock waves flashed past 30 feet above her head and continued to expand at a high speed. Hoo! A sandstorm followed closely behind the shock waves. Akatsuki, who was still in shock, squatted down and hugged Baihu tightly. At the same time, she activated the spiritual energy in her body and set up a barrier in front of her to defend against the sandstorm. Buzz! A semicircular red light barrier that was 5 feet in size appeared out of thin air, blocking the oncoming sandstorm. Yu Hongji was very clear about this sudden change in the situation. Other than Yi Fan, who else would be able to unleash such a world-shaking power? No matter how powerful the barrier around the cauldron was, it would be unable to withstand a single blow from Yi Fan. Akatsuki thought to herself. In the center of the sandstorm, the black-robed Yi Fan dispersed the demonic energy around him and returned to normal. He stood there silently and looked at the scene in front of him calmly. On the sandy ground in front of him, a huge golden light shield appeared out of thin air. It was over 30 feet tall and had a radius of over 100 feet. Under the bombardment of Yi Fan's heavenly demon power, the invisible barrier turned into a tangible object. Crack! A crisp sound rang out, and a tiny crack appeared on the dazzling golden barrier. The corners of Yi Fan's mouth curled up into a smile. Crack! 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 The crack on the barrier became bigger and soon, it covered the entire golden barrier. Bang! With a crisp cracking sound, the huge golden light shield instantly burst open, turning into countless golden light fragments that fell from the sky like a golden rain of light. The barrier around the cauldron, that required the power of the yin-yang immortal, was destroyed by Yi Fan's heavenly demon power. With a smile on his face, Yi Fan saw that the seal had been broken and immediately extended his right hand and flipped his palm toward the sand in front of him. Shah, as the yellow sand on the ground gathered together, a sand pillar that was over 100 feet thick rose from the ground and flew into the sky like a golden dragon. It landed on the sand several hundred feet away. He wanted to dig out the cauldron that was buried deep underground. The sand on the ground sank at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. In less than 15 minutes, a huge sand pit that was over 100 feet deep and several hundred feet wide had appeared on the ground. Not far away, a sand dune that was like a small hill had formed on the sand. Yi Fan's hand gesture did not change and the sand pillar continued to shoot out. Clang! After the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, a golden light instantly shot up from the sand pit into the sky. At the same time, the sound of metal clashing could be heard from the ground. It was so loud that it echoed endlessly. Found it! Yi Fan's eyes lit up. He retracted his spiritual energy and walked quickly to the edge of the huge sand pit. He squatted down and looked down. Through the golden light, Yi Fan could clearly see that within the huge sand pit that was several hundred feet deep, there was an extremely huge bronze cauldron that was sitting there steadily. The cauldron was more than 10 feet wide and 3 feet tall. It was covered with patterns and was surrounded by golden light. It was the cauldron! It was the cauldron! The moment he saw the cauldron, Yi Fan could not help but be overjoyed. All his hard work had not been in vain. He had finally found the cauldron. Swoosh! Yi Fan's body swayed and instantly appeared in the huge sand pit. He stretched out his right hand and slowly touched the huge cauldron in front of him. Buzz! The moment he touched the cauldron let out a deep cry. Cauldron above, I am Yi Fan. In order to save my wife's soul, I need the supreme secret inscriptions. If I have offended you in any way, please don't be offended. As Yi Fan spoke, he knelt on the ground and sincerely kowtowed 9 times to the cauldron. Qing Qinzi had once told him that the 9 cauldrons were ancient divine items and had long since gained intelligence. As the saying goes, one does not blame others for being polite. Yi Fan had broken the protective barrier and wanted to take away the divine cauldron's patterns. Naturally, he had to explain the reason and pray sincerely. Buzz! The cauldron let out another cry and the golden light around it instantly disappeared. Seeing this, Yi Fan was overjoyed. The disappearance of the golden light meant that the cauldron had agreed to let Yi Fan take away the patterns on the cauldron's body. Because if the golden light did not dissipate, Yi Fan would not be able to see the densely packed patterns on the cauldron. Yi Fan stood up and focused. He stared at the ancient patterns on the cauldron's body and activated his primordial spirit, devil spirit. Buzz! 2 red lights shot out from Yi Fan's eyes and shot onto the cauldron's body. Yi Fan turned his eyes and looked up and down. At the same time, he circled the cauldron to the right. Buzz! 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 Chapter 570. Buzz! When the last rune entered his mind, Yi Fan retracted the 2 red lights in his eyes. He flew out of the crater using his movement technique. Then, he activated his spiritual power and extended his right hand. He bent his fingers into a claw and sucked in the air toward the mountain-like sand pile several hundred feet away. Whoosh! The sand pillar rose again and flew into the crater. In the blink of an eye, the huge crater that was several hundred feet deep was quickly filled up by the sand. After doing all this, Yi Fan knelt on the sand and kowtowed 3 times toward the divine cauldron. Buzz! Countless golden lights gushed out from the sand. The golden light barrier that had been shattered by Yi Fan was restored to its original state. The golden light dazzled. The barrier of the divine cauldron was restored automatically. After 3 flashes, the golden light barrier slowly disappeared. Just like before Yi Fan arrived, It was incomparably transparent, flat, and quiet. Yi Fan stood up and turned around to leave. Hiss! Just as Yi Fan was about to use his movement technique, a low hissing sound came from the desert several hundred miles away. Yi Fan smiled and turned around. This voice was all too familiar to him. It was the fire snake. Whoosh! His figure flashed and disappeared in an instant. Then, he reappeared several hundred miles away in the sky. Above the golden sea of sand, a gigantic, fiery red fire snake was rapidly swimming towards the direction of the sand where the divine cauldron was buried. The earth-shattering sound and the 3 shock waves made the fire snake, who was absorbing the sun essence in the desert, become alert. It was worried that the golden bull would be taken away. Therefore, it didn't have time to absorb the sun essence and quickly rushed toward the golden bull. Before Yi Fan came back, it had to protect the golden bull. It couldn't let anyone get close to it. In the sky, Yi Fan looked down at the fire snake in the sea of sand and said with a smile, "Brother Snake, I trust you have been well since we last met." It was Yi Fan. When Fire Snake heard this sound, it immediately stopped and raised its huge head to look at the sky. High up in the sky, the silver-haired, black-robed Yi Fan slowly descended with his hands behind his back and a smile on his face. It was indeed Yi Fan. Fire Snake was delighted. Hiss! Hiss! It let out an excited hiss as it raised its giant dragon-like body and soared into the sky to welcome Yi Fan. In the blink of an eye, the man and the snake met in midair. "Old friend, we meet again," Yi Fan, who was hovering in the air, said with a smile as he reached out to stroke Fire Snake's large head. Hiss! Hiss! The fire snake rubbed its scalding and smooth head against Yi Fan's palm intimately, hissing incessantly. "I came here to retrieve something from the golden bull. I didn't intend to disturb your cultivation, but I didn't expect to alarm you," Yi Fan said to Fire Snake with a smile. Hiss! Hiss! The fire snake couldn't speak, so it could only hiss. Although Yi Fan didn't understand snake language, he could still tell that Fire Snake was very happy that he had come. "Cultivate well here and protect the people of Fire Dragon Town," Yi Fan said as he stroked Fire Snake. "Wait for me to gather all 9 divine bulls, then I'll come here immediately to rescue your wife and reunite you two." Although he was now the demon monarch of the demon realm and had the ability to reconstruct his body, Xian Er's soul was still in the hands of True Lord Fire Dragon. At that time, True Lord Fire Dragon had personally told him that the day he succeeded would be the day Xian was reborn. The day he succeeded referred to the day he gathered all 9 cauldrons and comprehended the divine cauldron secret technique, not the day he obtained the power of the heavenly demon. Immortals always spoke with hidden meanings. This was something he was very clear about. After hearing Yi Fan's words, Fire Snake nodded. "I still have to find the remaining 8 divine bulls, so we'll part ways here today. The next time we meet again will be the day I succeed. Brother Snake, wait for me," Yi Fan said solemnly as he looked into Fire Snake's huge eyes. Hiss! Fire Snake replied to Yi Fan, reluctant to part. Yi Fan smiled, patted Fire Snake's forehead, and disappeared in an instant. 50 kilometers away, Akatsuki was standing on a block of ice with Baihu in her arms. She was constantly looking in the direction of the voice. Whoosh! Yi Fan's figure suddenly appeared beside her out of thin air. Seeing Yi Fan return, Akatsuki smiled brightly. She was already accustomed to Yi Fan's astonishing movement technique. "Is everything done?" she asked when she saw Yi Fan smile. Yi Fan nodded with a smile. "That's great." Akatsuki was genuinely happy for Yi Fan. However, she also felt a hint of disappointment. After the 9 cauldrons were gathered, Yi Fan's wife, Fujiwara no Chiko, would wake up. At that time, they would be reunited as husband and wife. She could only be envious of them. When she thought of the moment when she would have to leave Yi Fan in the future, Akatsuki felt very uncomfortable. "What are you thinking about?" Yi Fan asked when he saw the disappointment on Akatsuki's face. "No, nothing." Akatsuki came to her senses and said, I'm thinking that it's still early, so where are we going next? Yuhongji began to use lies to cover it up. It's still early. Yi Fan smiled. How about this, I'll take you to a place. We'll rest there first, and then we'll leave for Sisui in the evening. Where? Akatsuki asked Yi Fan. My cave residence, Feng Ming Mountain, Lingyun Cave. Yi Fan looked at Akatsuki and said with a smile. He had already guessed Akatsuki's thoughts. How could Akatsuki's disappointed expression escape his eyes? Yi Fan could not bear to see this woman who had saved him with her own body and was deeply in love with him. Since it was still early, he decided to take her to his Lingyun cave to sit. Taking her to his Lingyun cave, he could entertain her and express his gratitude. Secondly, he could use his wedding cave residence to remind her that he was a married man. He could give her anything except for feelings. Your cave residence? Really? Akatsuki's eyes lit up. She did not expect that Yi Fan would take the initiative to take her to his cave residence. Of course it's real. Do you want to go? Yi Fan smiled and asked Akatsuki. Yes. Akatsuki nodded excitedly, her disappointment swept away. Let's go, we'll go now, Yi Fan said. With a flick of his sleeve, clouds appeared beneath his feet, and the 2 people and 1 fox flew into the sky. Why did you suddenly think of taking me to your cave residence? Akatsuki was surprised by Yi Fan's sudden invitation. You saved my life. I haven't thanked you yet. Yi Fan turned to look at Akatsuki from above the auspicious clouds and said with a smile, Since we have time now, I'll take good care of you. Take good care of me? Akatsuki smiled. How will you take good care of me? I'll make you a few of my signature dishes, then let you try the 100 flowers intoxication that I brewed in my previous life. Finally, I'll take you around my cave residence. Yi Fan smiled. You? You know how to cook? Akatsuki asked with a smile. What? Can't I cook? Yi Fan asked with a smile. I thought you only knew how to kill people. Akatsuki smiled. Actually, killing people is the same as cooking. You have to pay attention to technique, experience, and control of the fire. Yi Fan smiled and said to Akatsuki, Cooking is about color, aroma, and killing is about stability, accuracy, and ruthlessness. They say that governing a large country is like cooking a small fish. In my opinion, it's the same for killing people. Cooking uses kitchen utensils, killing uses knives and swords. Cooking produces oil, killing people bleed. When cooking, the ingredients sizzle, and when killing, the other party screams. Let's put it this way, an expert who knows how to kill will definitely become a good cook. If you keep talking like that, I'll lose my appetite, Akatsuki said. I've heard of many assassins' experiences in killing people, but to compare killing to cooking, this is the first time I've heard of it. Yi Fan smiled and didn't say anything else. Although Yu Hongji had a smile on her face, she felt a chill in her heart. Ever since Yi Fan became a demon, the murderous aura on his body had increased by dozens of times. If she hadn't heard those words with her own ears, she wouldn't have believed that they came from Yi Fan's mouth. The auspicious clouds moved as fast as lightning, and the mountains, rivers, and cities below flowed past their feet like water. An hour later, the 2 of them crossed thousands of miles and arrived at the boundary of Feng Ming Mountain. The mountain in front of us is Feng Ming Mountain, Yi Fan said to Akatsuki. Mountain? What mountain? Akatsuki looked at the empty plains in front of her with a puzzled expression. She turned to look at Yi Fan and asked, Why don't I see it? Yi Fan was stunned at first, then shook his head and smiled. Feng Ming Mountain had an invisible barrier set up by Brother Kim. Those who hadn't reached the highest level of cultivation couldn't even see it, let alone enter. Akatsuki was indeed a Japanese expert, but compared to a barrier set up by a top expert like Brother Kim, it was like heaven and earth. Yi Fan stretched out his palm and gently waved it in front of Akatsuki. A gentle green light flashed past. After the green light disappeared, Akatsuki's beautiful eyes widened as she exclaimed in a low voice. A few miles away, a huge green mountain peak appeared out of thin air. The entire mountain peak was carved into a mountain peak with uncanny craftsmanship. It rose from the ground and towered into the clouds, connecting heaven and earth. Looking at the huge green mountain peak in front of her, Akatsuki was dumbfounded. Her mouth opened into an O shape. What? Ever since she was young, the biggest mountain she had seen was only Mount Fuji. She had never seen such a strange mountain peak before. Putting aside the mountain peak for the time being, what really made her feel incredulous was the invisible barrier on the mountain peak. In terms of cultivation, Akatsuki could be considered a top-notch expert in Japan. Otherwise, Matsumoto Takeyoshi wouldn't have invited her to help. However, a barrier expert like her actually didn't notice the huge barrier in front of her. What kind of expert could set up such a domineering barrier? Akatsuki's expression changed. Yi-fan? Impossible. Yi-fan's spiritual energy was indeed powerful. If he used it to a certain extent, he could completely envelop the mountain peak with his spiritual energy. However, his spiritual energy could only play a protective role. It couldn't make such a huge mountain disappear completely. The person who could do this was unimaginably powerful. Even Yi-fan wouldn't be able to fight against him. Akatsuki thought to herself as the auspicious clouds under her feet arrived in front of the mountain peak. Chapter 571. Rumble. With a wave of Yi-fan's sleeves, the huge stone door opened with a loud rumble. Yi-fan and Akatsuki, who was carrying Baihu, walked side by side into the cave. The entrance of the Lingyun cave was covered with Brother Jin's extremely strong enchantment. At that time, Big Bear Rinchuan was blocked by this enchantment at the entrance of the cave. His right hand was crippled, and he almost lost all of his spiritual power. Because Akatsuki was carrying Baihu and walking side by side with Yi-fan, she wasn't repelled by the barrier and entered safely. When she saw the Lingyun cave abode, Akatsuki couldn't help but turn pale with fright. How was this a cave abode? This was clearly a paradise, a paradise! This Lingyun cave was simply too big. Pavilions, streams, rockery, waterfalls, small bridges, exotic flowers, and fragrant flowers. It was simply another world. The entire cave abode was illuminated by the huge luminous pearl at the top of the cave, looking extremely beautiful, as if it was a paradise. Akatsuki's mouth was wide open, and she stood rooted to the ground, unable to regain her senses for a long time. How is it? Not bad, right? Yi-fan closed the stone door and smiled at the shocked Akatsuki. This is your cave abode, the Lingyun cave? Akatsuki asked Yi-fan in disbelief as she admired the beautiful scenery in front of her. I'll go to the kitchen to make some food first. I'll have Xiao Zhao show you around. By the time you're done, the food and wine will be almost ready, Yi-fan said as he looked down at Baihu in Akatsuki's arms. He smiled and said, Xiao Zhao, I'll leave Hongji to you. Baihu nodded and then jumped down from Akatsuki's arms. I'll help you in the kitchen. Akatsuki recovered and said to Yi-fan. Here, you're the guest and I'm the host. The guest changes with the host, Yi-fan said to Akatsuki with a smile. You guys go around first. I'll call you when I'm done. After Yi-fan finished speaking, his figure instantly disappeared. Woo! Baihu wagged its snow-white tail and chirped at Akatsuki. Then, it turned around and led the way. Akatsuki smiled and followed behind Baihu. It took him an entire hour to finish this round of spinning. The more Akatsuki looked at the cave, the more she liked it. The environment here was quiet and secluded. It was simple and elegant, with bridges and bamboos and flowers everywhere. It was truly a good place to live in seclusion. Thinking of Yi-fan and Fujiwara no Chiko playing chess and drinking tea here, Akatsuki felt envious from the bottom of her heart. Compared to Fujiwara no Chiko, she was really unlucky. They had the same face, but a different fate. If she could spend a period of time with Yi Fan in this cave, even if it was only for a day, she would be willing to die. But unfortunately, this idea was only an idea. Sigh. Akatsuki stood in front of the waterfall in the garden. She gently stroked Baihu, who was lying beside her, and sighed. Why are you sighing? Yi Fan's voice came from behind Akatsuki. Akatsuki hurriedly turned around and saw Yi Fan standing behind her, looking at her with a smile. When did you come? Akatsuki asked with a red face. Just when you were sighing. Yi Fan smiled and said, What's wrong? Is there something bothering you? No. Akatsuki avoided his gaze and said, I've already prepared the meal. Miss Yu, please take a seat. Yi Fan said as his body flashed and he extended his hand to make an inviting gesture. Akatsuki pursed her lips and smiled. Passing through the garden, around the rockery, and across the small bridge, 2 people and 1 fox slowly walked to the second floor. This second floor was almost the same size as the first floor. There were more than 10 huge stone houses surrounding it. In the middle of the empty space, an extremely huge stone table was reflected in Akatsuki's eyes. This stone table was more than 30 feet long and more than 10 feet wide. It was made of bluestone, and it was simple and heavy. Above the stone table, a huge golden luminous pearl hung high above, and its dazzling brilliance illuminated the bluestone table in a golden light. On either side of the stone table, there were 13 huge and smooth bluestone taisha chairs. There were 6 chairs on the left and right sides, and 1 chair was placed in the middle of the main seat. On the stone table, there were 6 types of delicacies, 3 types of meat, 3 types of vegetables, and 6 types of delicacies. Stir-fried vegetables, deep-fried eggplant, cold seasonal vegetables, braised pork trotters, rock sugar pork knuckles, and a large bowl of fish soup. Did you make all of this? Akatsuki looked at the sumptuous dishes in front of her, and raised her head to look at Yi Fan. If it wasn't me, then did you make it? Yi Fan smiled and handed a pair of chopsticks to Akatsuki. Try it. Akatsuki took the chopsticks and put a little of each dish into her mouth. The seasonal vegetables were refreshing, the eggplant was crispy, the pork trotters were chewy, and the pork knuckles were fragrant. Akatsuki nodded her head continuously. Yi Fan's culinary skills really weren't just for show. How is it? Not bad, right? Yi Fan said as he carried the drooling Baihu to the table. Then, he used his chopsticks to put some vegetables on a plate and place them in front of Baihu. Baihu lowered its head and sniffed. Then, it began to eat in big mouthfuls. As long as it was something Yi Fan made, it wouldn't refuse it. Did your wife teach you to make these dishes? Akatsuki asked Yi Fan as she ate. As soon as the words left her mouth, she regretted it. Mentioning his wife at this time was really bad timing. She really didn't know how to chat. Akatsuki gently bit her chopsticks and looked up at Yi Fan like a child who had made a mistake. This time, she had said something wrong. It would definitely evoke Yi Fan's sad memories. However, Yi Fan didn't look as sad as she imagined. He was startled at first, then he smiled. That's where you're wrong. Yi Fan smiled as he picked up the celadone bowl and filled Akatsuki's bowl with rice. Chico's Japanese culinary skills are good, but when it comes to Chinese food, it's terrible. Yi Fan said as he placed the rice in front of Akatsuki. Terrible? That can't be. You must be lying to me. Akatsuki took the rice and smiled. Chico's salty duck is bitter and hard to swallow. The fried eggplant is burnt on the outside and not cooked on the inside. The stir-fried vegetables are not even long enough. Only the fish soup is drinkable. Yi Fan said with a smile. That's not bad. Then you can drink the fish soup. Akatsuki said with a smile. My fish soup is exactly the same as Chico's. Try it. Yi Fan smiled as he pushed the fish soup in front of Akatsuki. Akatsuki smiled, picked up the spoon, scooped up a spoonful of fish soup, and took a sip. The fish soup was mellow and tasted delicious. How is it? Yi Fan asked with a smile. It's delicious, Akatsuki replied. Hee hee, Yi Fan smiled as he leaned back in the chair. He said with a smirk, don't just drink the soup. Try the fish. Akatsuki frowned, picked up the chopsticks and put a piece of fish into her mouth. If the fish soup was delicious, the fish would also be delicious. This principle couldn't be simpler. She didn't understand what Yi Fan was planning. However, when she chewed the fish in her mouth, she immediately understood Yi Fan's meaning. Akatsuki frowned and spat out a few fingernail-sized fish scales from her mouth. This fish. Why didn't you scrape off the fish scales? Akatsuki looked up and asked Yi Fan. At the same time, Akatsuki understood Yi Fan's meaning. Obviously, when Fujiwara no Chiko made the fish soup for Yi Fan, she also didn't scrape off the fish scales. Yi Fan smiled. He picked up his chopsticks and picked up a large piece of fish with scales from the soup bowl into his own bowl. You drink the fish soup. I'll eat the fish, Yi Fan said with a smile as he ate the fish in big bites. Akatsuki was silent. She picked up a few grains of rice and put them in her mouth. They tasted like wax. Yi Fan's deep feelings for Fujiwara no Chiko could be seen from the bowl of fish soup. She suddenly understood why Yi Fan brought her here. She also knew why Yi Fan wanted to make this fish soup with fish scales. All of these indicated one thing. Yi Fan was hinting to her. He was hinting to her that he had a family. Don't just eat the food. Come, try the 100 flowers drunk that I made in my previous life. This is a good wine. Yi Fan chewed on the fish, picked up a jar of wine on the table, broke the yellow seal, and filled 2 stone wine cups. I heard that this 100 flowers drunk is made with the dew of 100 flowers in the morning. Pa. Before Yi Fan could finish speaking, Akatsuki put down the bamboo chopsticks in her hand, picked up the stone cup in front of Yi Fan, put it to her mouth, and drank it in one gulp. The stone cups in Lingyun Cave were almost twice the size of normal cup. Akatsuki drank at least half a caddy of 100 flowers drunk in this cup. Akatsuki, drink slowly. Yi Fan was stunned by Akatsuki's actions. But Akatsuki put down the empty wine cup, then reached out again, picked up another cup of 100 flowers drunk, and gulped it down again. She didn't care what 100 flowers drunk was. Right now, she just wanted to get drunk. The moment she tilted her head back to drink, 2 drops of clear tears flowed down from the corners of Akatsuki's eyes. Hongji. Yi Fan reached out with one hand, bent his fingers into a claw, and directly sucked the stone cup in Akatsuki's hand into his hand. You're crazy. Yi Fan slammed the stone cup on the table and said, How can you drink wine like this? If you don't drink wine like this, how do you drink it? Akatsuki looked straight at Yi Fan and asked, Drinking like this will harm your body. Yi Fan frowned and said to Akatsuki, Harm my body? Humph. Akatsuki shook her head and laughed. It's better to harm my body than to be sad. What do you think? After drinking 2 cups of 100 flowers drunk, she was starting to feel tipsy. This 100 flowers drunk was brewed by Eldritch more than 300 years ago using a secret method, and its aftereffects were extremely strong. As the saying goes, the older the ginger, the spicier the wine, the more fragrant the wine. This 100 flowers drunk had been brewed for more than 300 years, so its aftereffects were even more outrageous. Yu Hongji had just finished drinking, and her face was flushed red, tender and alluring. Hongji, you're drunk, Yi Fan said to Akatsuki with heartache. He didn't think that his bowl of fish soup would make Akatsuki have such a big reaction. If he had known, he wouldn't have served this dish. Drunk? Humph. Akatsuki, who reeked of alcohol, laughed. It would be better if I was drunk. Hongji, Yi Fan wanted to explain, but he didn't know what to say. Akatsuki, who was drunk, closed her eyes and waved her hand at Yi Fan. You don't have to say anything, I understand. Akatsuki, whose eyes were red, looked at Yi Fan and said drunkenly, You don't have to give me any hints, and you don't have to feel like you owe me anything. Everything I did was voluntary, and I never thought of getting anything in return from you. Although I, Akatsuki, don't have any abilities, I'm definitely not the kind of person who would snatch someone's love away from me. You don't have to worry about this. Hongji. Yi-fan didn't think that Akatsuki would be so direct. Not only did he serve the fish soup wrongly, but he also shouldn't have served the 100 flowers drunk. Baihu, who was eating with its head down, saw this situation and tilted its head to look at the two of them with a puzzled expression. It didn't understand why the two people, who were talking and laughing, suddenly became like this. Your cultivation is now incredible, and your devil spirit is boundless. I can't help you much. Akatsuki picked up the wine jar and filled the stone cup in front of her, and said to Yi-fan, after going to Sisui tonight, I will ask Matsumoto Takeyoshi to take a rest. We won't be partners in the future. You will have more freedom to act alone. This cup of wine is our farewell. Akatsuki shakily poured the wine, picked up the wine cup, and raised it to Yi-fan with tears in her eyes, and drank it. Chapter 572. The sky gradually darkened, and in the blink of an eye, it was already late at night. Yi-fan and Akatsuki, who was holding Baihu, stepped on the auspicious clouds and slowly floated in the direction of the Sisui River. At this time, the stars were twinkling in Yikong, the crescent moon was like a hook, the wind was blowing, and the white clouds were floating leisurely. It was a beautiful scene. But the two people on the auspicious clouds were not in the mood to enjoy such a beautiful scene. They were both silent and did not say a word. A good thank you banquet turned into a farewell banquet. Yi-fan did not feel good about it. Spilled water can't be taken back. Now that things had come to this point, he could only let nature take its course. As the saying goes, better a short pain than a long pain. It was only a matter of time before he and Akatsuki separated. Since Akatsuki took the initiative to separate, then so be it. Separation was good for both of them. Akatsuki's eyes were red, and her face was full of sadness. She had thought that there would be a day when she would separate from Yi-fan, but she did not expect it to come so soon. Moreover, she took the initiative to separate. Love was really a wonderful thing. It could make people give up everything for each other, even their lives. It could also make people choose to leave for each other's happiness. Woo! Baihu, who was lying in Akatsuki's arms, looked sideways at Yi-fan, then looked up at Akatsuki, and let out a whimper. It did not understand why Akatsuki took the initiative to leave, nor did it understand why Yi-fan did not ask it to stay. The two people and one fox each had their own thoughts, and focused on hurrying. After the time it took to burn a stick of incense, the auspicious clouds floated directly above the Sisui River. It was already late at night, and both sides of the Sisui River were very quiet. Occasionally, there were a few sounds made by unknown insect. After carefully sensing the surroundings with his 5 senses, Yi-fan urged the auspicious clouds under his feet to slowly descend to the river bank below. After landing, Yi-fan said to Akatsuki, "Wait for me here with Xiao Zhao. If anything happens, just shout for me." Akatsuki bit her lower lip and nodded gently. Yi-fan frowned slightly. If it were any other time, Akatsuki would definitely have proposed to go with him. However, this time she chose to stay behind. "I'm leaving," Yi-fan said as he turned around and walked slowly to the shore. His toes touched the ground and he jumped into the Sisui River. Buzz! In the instant that Yi-fan entered the water, a huge transparent ball of light appeared around Yi-fan, completely enveloping him. The water-repelling pearl on his body began to take effect. Whoosh! The water-repelling ball of light carried the black-robed Yi-fan towards the depths of the river. Seeing Yi-fan enter the water alone, Akatsuki, who was standing on the shore, felt uncomfortable. The last time she came to the Sisui River, Yi-fan had taken the initiative to bring her into the water and even joked that she was a non-swimmer. This time, he didn't say that. Instead, he directly told her to wait for him here. The distance between the two of them was suddenly pulled apart. The last time they were underwater, the scene was still vivid in her mind. At that time, Yi Fan had also told her that if he was bewitched by the divine cauldron's illusion, she must remember to pull him out of the illusion. Wait a minute. Illusion. Akatsuki suddenly raised her head. Yi Fan was now in the water alone. Would he be bewitched by the divine cauldron's illusion? He had entered the demonic path, and his demonic spirit was blazing. Evil energy surrounded his body, and it was very easy for him to be bewitched by illusions. Now that she and Xiao Zhao weren't by his side, if he really was bewitched by illusions, Akatsuki didn't dare to think any further. She placed Baihu in her arms on the ground, squatted down and said to Baihu, "Xiao Zhao, your brother Yi has already entered the demonic path. If he enters the Sisui River alone, it's very easy for him to be bewitched by the divine cauldron's illusion. It might be dangerous." When Baihu heard Akatsuki's words, her eyes immediately widened. "Woo! Woo!" Baihu anxiously spun around in circles, whimpering non-stop. It had seen the power of the divine cauldron's illusion with its own eyes. Last time, if it hadn't scratched Yi Fan's neck fiercely, Yi Fan would still be in the illusion, unable to extricate himself. "Don't worry, I'll go into the water to help him now." Akatsuki comforted Baihu and said, "It's just that I don't have enough spiritual power, so I can't bring you into the water. Wait for us here obediently and don't run around." "Woo!" Baihu hurriedly nodded. "Then I'll go," Akatsuki said as she stood up, took off the red sword on her body and put it on the ground, then quickly walked to the shore. Looking at the bottomless Sisui River, Akatsuki's heart was filled with fear. She was not afraid of anything since she was young, but she was afraid of water. Now it was really like the old saying, "What you fear will happen." However, now was not the time to be afraid. The later she went into the water, the more danger Yi Fan would be in. After taking a few deep breaths, she closed her eyes and jumped into the river. "Woo!" Baihu trotted to the shore and looked at Akatsuki, who was swimming into the depths, and whimpered. In the deep water, Akatsuki, who was dressed in red, held her breath and urged the spiritual power in her body to set up a red transparent air shield that was 3 feet in size over her head. Inside the air shield was a large amount of air that she had stored before entering the water. In fact, with her spiritual power cultivation and the 5 elements ninjutsu, she could set up an air shield that was 10 feet in size and then use the water to dive down. But she did not do so. Yi Fan's speed in the water was too fast. If she used ordinary water ninjutsu to dive, she would not be able to catch up with Yi Fan. Only by using spiritual power to urge the water ninjutsu could she reach Yi Fan's side before Yi Fan was hit by the illusion. In this way, she could only use a small part of her spiritual power to maintain her breathing, and the rest of her spiritual power was used to urge her movement technique. Shwa, a red shadow, went down at high speed in the water, bringing with it a burst of turbulence. At the bottom of the Sisui River, Yi Fan urged the water-repelling light ball and slowly went down. Soon, he felt a huge suction force. Now, he was not far from the huge black hole where the divine cauldron was. He urged his spiritual power to control the falling speed of the light ball. At the same time, he used his 5 senses to pay close attention to all the movements below. Just like Akatsuki was worried, he was also worried about whether he would be hit by the illusion. Since the divine cauldron at the bottom of the Sisui River had already gained intelligence, it must have sensed that his strength was not the same as before. Now, he had to be 120% alert to prevent the divine cauldron's spirit from casting an illusion on him. As the suction force from below grew stronger and stronger, Yi Fan in the water-repelling light ball came to the top of the huge black hole. Under his feet, the huge black hole with a radius of more than 100 feet was like a huge black mouth, sucking in the water crazily. He suspended the water-repelling light ball above it and stabilized his body. What he had to do next was to break the seal of the divine cauldron in the black hole and obtain the divine cauldron's inscriptions. Yi Fan closed his eyes and prepared to mobilize the heavenly demon's power. However, at this moment, a weak and familiar aura came down from the top of his head at high speed. This aura was very familiar to him. It was Akatsuki. Yi Fan was shocked and suddenly raised his head and opened his eyes. More than 100 feet above his head, Akatsuki, who was dressed in red, had a pale face. Her eyes were closed and a string of small bubbles came out of her mouth. She rushed down into the black hole at an extremely fast speed. In order to find Yi Fan as soon as possible, she used 90% of her spirit energy to activate her movement technique. This caused her to be only able to breathe for a short period of time. By the time she was halfway down, the red chi barrier covering her head had already disappeared. With her firm belief, she forced herself to hold her breath and continued to activate her spirit energy, quickly descending. However, no matter how strong one's belief was, there was a limit. No matter how strong one's spirit energy was, it could not produce air. Moving underwater consumed aura, not to mention fully activating her spirit energy. When she reached the water level with the black hole's gravitational force, Akatsuki finally fainted due to lack of breath. Following the black hole's gravitational force, the unconscious her speed became faster and faster, heading straight for the black hole. Whoosh! In just an instant, Akatsuki's red figure flashed in front of Yi Fan and rushed down at high speed into the black hole. Hongji. When Yi Fan, who had recovered, saw this situation, he suddenly activated his body and turned into a green light, chasing after Akatsuki. Whoosh! Yi Fan's speed was like lightning, and he quickly rushed to Akatsuki's side. He grabbed Akatsuki's waist and immediately activated his spirit energy. Whoosh! With Akatsuki in his arms, Yi Fan rose at full speed and left the black hole. Hongji! Hongji! After using the water avoidance pearl's ball of light to envelop Akatsuki, Yi Fan began to loudly shout her name. As he shouted Akatsuki's name, he used his 5 senses to sense the movements on the water surface. He began to worry about Xiao Zhao's safety. Akatsuki had rushed down by herself, so something must have happened. What made him feel relieved was that Xiao Zhao's aura was normal except for being a bit irritable. She was anxiously walking back and forth on the shore. In his arms, Akatsuki's face was pale, her whole body was wet, and she was not breathing. Her lungs had been sucked in a lot of river water, so she could not breathe at all. Yi Fan pressed one hand on Akatsuki's chest and urged his spirit energy to enter Akatsuki's body, forcing out the river water that had accumulated in her lungs. Large mouthfuls of river water came out of Akatsuki's mouth. Hongji! Hongji, wake up! Hongji! Yi Fan shook Akatsuki in his arms. But even so, Akatsuki still did not wake up. Her spirit energy was now exhausted, and she had no aura, so she could not breathe on her own. Seeing that Akatsuki was about to die, Yi Fan frowned, then he lowered his head and kissed Akatsuki's lip. Saving people was more important, so he could not care so much. Putong, putong. The moment he kissed Akatsuki's soft lips, Yi Fan could clearly hear his heart beating faster and faster. Under his long breath, Akatsuki slowly opened her eyes. When she saw Yi Fan kissing her, Akatsuki's beautiful eyes instantly opened wide. Oh! She let out a moan. Seeing Akatsuki wake up, Yi Fan's face was red, so he stopped. You! What are you doing? Akatsuki's face was red and she asked. You still ask me? Why didn't you stay up there? Why did you run here? Don't you want to live? Yi Fan calmed down and asked, Do you know, if I didn't find you in time, you would have been buried in this black hole. I, Akatsuki stammered, I was afraid that you would be enchanted by my illusionary technique, so I. Illusionary technique? You rushed down here with no regard for your life because of this? Yi Fan asked with furrowed brows after hearing this. He suddenly understood why Akatsuki had entered the water. Yes. Akatsuki lowered her head and said with a red face. She had come down to help Yi Fan, but in the end, Yi Fan had saved her and even kissed her. Are you all right now? Yi Fan's tone softened as he asked. I'm fine. Akatsuki lowered her head and said. That's good. Yi Fan said, Stand behind me, I'm going to break this enchantment. The most important thing now was to obtain the patterns on the divine cauldron. Akatsuki nodded and stood behind Yi Fan. Yi Fan closed his eyes and began to activate the power of the heavenly demon. Chapter 573. The flames rose again and the skeleton reappeared. The swastika on Yi Fan's forehead retreated with a green light and was replaced by a red light. His eyes were blood red and radiated a bright light. His silver hair soared to the sky. Behind him, Akatsuki's eyes were wide open and her face was filled with fear. At this time, Yi Fan was emitting an endless murderous aura and blood-red flames that soared to the sky. She was so frightened that her hair stood on end and she trembled with fear. The gigantic skull with a ferocious face in the middle of the blood-red flames made her tremble all over and her hair stand on end. The powerful spiritual pressure that Yi Fan was emitting made it hard for her to breathe. She was on the verge of fainting. Blood Devil's spirit, Heavenly Devil's power. Akatsuki truly experienced Yi Fan's devil spirit cultivation. She resisted the enormous spiritual pressure and the great fear that came from her heart. She tried her best to not make a sound. But even so, her teeth still couldn't help but chatter. The expressionless Yi Fan slightly turned his head and used his blood-red eyes to look at Akatsuki behind him. He could feel Akatsuki's fear. Akatsuki was scared out of her wits by Yi Fan's blood-red eyes. The enormous heavenly devil's spiritual pressure, the sinister huge skull, the endless murderous aura, and Yi Fan's terrifying blood-red eyes. How could Akatsuki, who had just recovered and had exhausted all her spiritual energy, be able to withstand this kind of fright? Her vision turned black and her body went limp. She slowly fell into the waterproof light sphere and lost consciousness. Yi Fan slowly turned his head. He had already expected that Akatsuki wouldn't be able to withstand his heavenly devil's spiritual pressure. Fainting now was actually a good thing for her. Otherwise, when he unleashed the heavenly demon's power to the maximum, her spirit chi would be completely shattered, and she would lose all her cultivation. Once Akatsuki fainted, the almost depleted Reiki in her sea of Reiki would cut off its connection with the outside world and automatically enter a dormant state. Maintaining the basic functions of the human body would be its primary task, and it would not respond to the external Reiki pressure at all. In this way, even if Yi Fan raised his spiritual energy to the highest level, Akatsuki would not be affected in the slightest. In the early morning in the Fire Dragon Town's desert, the reason why Yi Fan had left Akatsuki and Xiao Zhao 100 kilometers away from the Divine Cauldron was because he was worried that when he activated the Sky Demon's power, it would affect them. Yi Fan continued to circulate the power of the Heavenly Fiend, raising his primordial spirit to its limits. Buzz! The huge flames suddenly glowed with a brilliant red light, and instantly swelled to twice its original size. Buzz, 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 countless gigantic bolts of green lightning interweaved and shuttled back and forth like lightning. Boom! The soaring flames rushed out of the Sisui River's surface and went straight up into the sky, causing a pillar of water to shoot up into the sky. Woo! Baihu, who was anxiously waiting by the shore, saw this situation and immediately retreated with a cry. Looking at the bright red flames that soared into the sky, Baihu's anxious heart relaxed. It was obvious that Yi Fan was not bewitched by the illusion, and the soaring flames were the best evidence. Above the black hole, Yi Fan, who was inside the water-repelling ball of light, was enveloped in red light. Lightning wrapped around his body, his black robe fluttered, and his silver hair fluttered. His eyes were slightly closed, and his drooping right hand bent into a claw. Buzz, 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 5 blood-red bolts of lightning slowly flowed out from his slightly bent fingertips and gathered in the center of his palm, forming a blood-red ball of light that was 3 inches in size. The ball of light was 7 inches in size, and it was filled with demonic spirit. The red light was resplendent, and it flowed with brilliant colors. It slowly rotated in the center of Yi Fan's palm. Buzz, 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 more than 10 bolts of green lightning swam around the ball of light, making buzzing sounds. I didn't expect you to have obtained the power of the heavenly demon. As an ethereal voice sounded, a stunning woman appeared in the black hole out of thin air. This woman's long hair fluttered in the wind, and her beautiful eyes rippled. She had bright eyes, red lips, and white teeth. Her entire body exuded a cold light, as if she was a dragon lady who had descended to the mortal world, Chang'us Li Gong. Yi Fan slowly opened his eyes and looked at the woman in front of him who had transformed into his wife, with a sinister smile on his face. "You won't be able to bewitch me this time," Yi Fan said with a smile. "Of course," the woman said with a smile. "The demon realm's demon lord is invincible. How can I, an illusory spirit, withstand the power of the heavenly demon? Since you know your limits, why did you show yourself?" Yi Fan asked with a smile. "I wanted to see with my own eyes the woman beside you who looks exactly like your wife." Fujiwara no Chiko looked at Akatsuki, who had fallen into the water-repelling ball of light, and said with a smile, "Aren't you curious about her?" "Curious?" Yi Fan asked with a smile. "What are you curious about?" "She looks exactly like your wife, and then she appeared by your side by chance. In the end, she fell in love with you without hesitation. Why? Do you think all of this is a coincidence?" "Ha ha." Fujiwara no Chiko covered her mouth to hide her laughter. Yi Fan frowned. The words of the illusory spirit made him suspicious. Could there be more to this matter? "If it's not a coincidence, what is it?" Yi Fan asked with a frown. "Ha ha." Fujiwara no Chiko giggled. "If you want to know the secret, you have to promise me one thing." "What is it?" Yi Fan asked. "Kiss me just like how you kissed her just now. The kind that makes my heart beat faster." As Fujiwara no Chiko spoke, she floated 3 feet away from Yi Fan and looked at Yi Fan with a smile. "If you continue to pester me, believe it or not, I will kill you." Yi Fan, who was in the flames, said coldly. "Kill me? Ha ha." Fujiwara no Chiko laughed. "I am the illusory spirit guarding the divine cauldron in the river. As long as the divine cauldron exists, I will always exist. No one can do anything to me unless you destroy the divine cauldron. However, do you have the guts to do so?" As Fujiwara no Chiko spoke, she moved her head closer to Yi Fan. Yi Fan, who was in the flames, was instantly furious. Buzz with a thought, the red ball of light in his hand, which was emitting red light and intertwining with electric light, suddenly grew from 3 inches to 3 feet. "Scram!" Yi Fan shouted in a mixed male and female voice. He suddenly threw the ball of light in his hand at Fujiwara no Chiko. Roar! In the flames, the huge skull, which was emitting green light, roared towards the sky. Whoosh! The moment the ball of light rushed over, Fujiwara no Chiko disappeared into thin air. The bloody ball of light, which was surrounded by green light, had a long tail. It was like a meteor chasing after the moon as it rushed down towards the black hole at high speed. The dazzling red light illuminated the black hole in a sea of red light. Whoosh! After the huge ball of light rushed into the black hole, there was no movement for a long time. The atmosphere was terrifyingly quiet. Yi Fan was expressionless as he looked down quietly. The black hole was bottomless. Even with his ball of light, it would take some time to reach the bottom of the black hole. Bang! After a long time, a huge and dull roar came from the black hole. The ball of light had reached the bottom. Rumble! The riverbed shook and the river water surged. The walls of the huge black cave began to crumble as it shook. Huge rocks peeled off the walls and smashed into the cave in an earth-shattering manner. At the same time, a huge echo began to rise from the black hole, getting closer and closer. Then, a golden and red light spot instantly appeared in the black hole. It gradually became bigger and bigger as it rose from the black hole at high speed. Whoosh! Yifan moved his body and instantly flashed to the side of the black hole. Boom! Just as Yifan moved his body, a huge beam of light, which was over 100 feet thick, shot out from the black hole with a loud bang. The beam of light, which was golden and red, rushed up like a huge dragon. Yifan, who was hovering on the side of the beam of light, urged his spiritual power to stabilize the ball of light and prevent it from being sucked in by the water caused by the beam of light. Boom! On the surface of the river, the golden and red beam of light broke through the water and went straight into the sky. Baihu, who was hiding in the bushes, was so frightened by this scene that she did not dare to breathe. Her 4 claws tightly grasped the shaking ground, and she lay there motionlessly. Looking at the bright beam of light in front of him, Yifan, who was in the ball of light, curved his lips and revealed a satisfied smile. The enchantment of the divine cauldron in the Sisui River had been completely broken by his heavenly demon power. The second divine cauldron was about to be obtained. As the huge rotating beam of light slowly disappeared, the shaking riverbed gradually calmed down. Yifan urged the ball of light to go down the huge black hole at high speed. Whoosh! 2 huge red beams of light shot out from his eyes and shone directly into the bottom of the black hole. At the bottom of the black hole, which was almost 10,000 feet deep, a huge bronze cauldron with a bright green light lay quietly at the bottom of the black hole. It was the divine cauldron. Yifan, who was falling from the sky, smiled and his body disappeared instantly. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Yifan's body appeared beside the divine cauldron. The divine cauldron in front of him was about the same size as the divine cauldron in the desert of Fire Dragon Town. It was enveloped in green light and surrounded by auspicious air. Its entire body was densely engraved with mysterious patterns. Divine cauldron above, Junior Yifan, in order to save my beloved wife from suffering, came here rashly to ask for the divine cauldron's patterns. If there is anything that is rude and presumptuous, I hope the divine cauldron will not take offense. Yifan said in a clear voice. Then, his knees went soft and he knelt on the ground. He respectfully kowtowed 9 times to the divine cauldron. Buzz! The huge divine cauldron's body emitted a green light and let out a low cry. Then, the light disappeared. Seeing this, Yifan was overjoyed. The disappearance of the divine cauldron's light meant that the divine cauldron had agreed to let Yifan take away the cauldron's patterns. He stood up from the ball of light and urged it to slowly float in front of the divine cauldron. Whoosh! The red light in Yifan's eyes reappeared and shot straight towards the divine cauldron. He moved his eyes up and down and at the same time, circled the divine cauldron to the right. Buzz! The mysterious patterns on the divine cauldron transformed into runes and patterns that flashed with green light. They followed the 2 red pillars of light and slowly flew into Yifan's mind. After completely absorbing the patterns on the divine cauldron into his mind, Yifan bowed towards the divine cauldron again. After doing all this, Yifan, who was in a good mood, carried the unconscious Akatsuki by her waist and urged the ball of light to go against the flow. Buzz! The moment he left the black hole, the huge black hole shone with a golden light and the suction force reappeared. The divine cauldron barrier was restored to its original state. Yifan looked down at the black hole and smiled. He increased his speed and rushed towards the surface of the water. Under Yifan's continuous urging, the ball of light became faster and faster. Whoosh! Following a huge wave, Yifan, who was carrying Akatsuki, rushed out of the water and slowly landed on the riverbank. Woo! Baihu, who was hiding in the bushes, saw Yi Fan appear and immediately rushed over excitedly. Due to the flames that soared into the sky and the shaking of the earth, the river water surged and the river water surged. At this moment, its entire body was drenched and covered in water. It was in a sorry state. Ha ha ha! Xiao Zhao, how did you become like this? After placing Akatsuki flat on the ground, Yi Fan caressed the drenched Baihu and laughed loudly. Hearing that, Baihu quickly shook his head and shook off the water droplets on his body. Yi Fan was unable to dodge the splashing water droplets and laughed continuously. Woo! Seeing that Akatsuki was unconscious, Baihu immediately looked at Yi Fan and whimpered. Don't worry, she just fainted and will wake up soon. Yi Fan laughed as he stroked Baihu's fur. Mr. Xieyue, please forgive me for not going out to meet you in the water mansion. Yi Fan was chatting with Baihu when an old voice came from the river. Yi Fan frowned and turned to look at the river. Whoosh! Following the appearance of a huge whirlpool in the river, an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion floated up from the river and slowly flew in front of Yi Fan. You are? Yi Fan stood up and asked. I am the god of the Sisui River. I am here to pay my respects to Mr. Eldritch. The old man lowered his head slightly towards Yi Fan. Chapter 574. Yes, I am. Seeing Yi Fan ask, the old man cupped his hands and answered to Yi Fan. Yi Fan greets your eminence. Yi Fan saw that the old man in front of him was surrounded by celestial qi and auspicious qi. He knew that he was undoubtedly a celestial, so he immediately returned the greeting. Mr. Eldritch, you're too polite. The old man in yellow nodded and waved his hand at Yi Fan. I'm just a river god. My position is lowly and my cultivation is shallow. I can't compare to a celestial from the upper realm. How can I receive such a great greeting from you? Your eminence, you're wrong. Yi Fan raised his head and said, to the heavenly realm, you may have a lowly position, but to the people on both sides of the Sisui River, your position is far more important than those celestial beings from the upper realm. Rice irrigation, drinking water, fishing, transportation, which one of these can be separated from the Sisui River? In my opinion, the respect of a god is not determined by the level of a god and his own cultivation. Whoever makes the people happy and free them from suffering is the one who is truly respected. Ha ha ha! The old man stroked his long beard and laughed. People say that Mr. Eldritch is arrogant and unruly. He despises etiquette and abhors evil. He does things his own way and judges everything based on his own merit. Seeing you today, you're still as elegant as before. Your eminence, you flatter me. Yi Fan smiled at the river god and cupped his hands. May I know why your eminence is looking for me this time? To tell you the truth, I'm here to give you a treasure. The river god smiled and said to Yi Fan. A treasure? Yi Fan was puzzled and asked, what treasure? One of the 9 scabbards of the frost dragon, the Chunyo scabbard. As the river god spoke, he flipped his palm and a silver light shone in his hand. Amidst the silver light, a 5-inch silver object floated above the old man's palm and shone with a dazzling light. The object had a dragon head and a snake body with scales and horns. It was wrapped in auspicious light and surrounded by auspicious qi. It was the Chunyo scabbard. Yi Fan's eyes lit up. He never thought that the Chunyo sword sheath of the 9 sheaths of the frost dragon would be in the hands of sea water god. Whiz! Just as Yi Fan was in a daze, the frost dragon's sword that was coiled around his waist suddenly glowed with brilliant light. It let out a humming sound as it left Yi Fan and hovered in front of Yi Fan, flashing with silver light as it let out an excited cry. Han Long had already sensed one of the 9 suns, Chunyo. The Chunyo sword scabbard hovering in sea water god's hand began to tremble in excitement as well. Whoosh! The sword and the scabbard instantly rushed towards each other and merged into one. clang, after the reunion of the divine weapon father and son, the cold dragon sword that was floating in the air suddenly let out a roar of a tiger and a dragon. The silver light instantly surged, and the sword light soared into the sky, directly shooting towards the bull. At the same time, the small silver snake coiled around the hilt of the cold dragon sword underwent a huge change. Buzz! 2 rays of green light shot out from the gem-encrusted silver snake's eyes, and the resplendent silver snake instantly began to slowly crawl around the scabbard. In the process of crawling, a dragon claw gradually emerged from the snake's belly. At this time, the cold dragon sword had already obtained the 4 divine scabbards, Tao Tai, Tao Wu, and Qiu. The silver snake on the cold dragon sword also transformed into a dragon shape with the return of the 4 divine scabbards. A dragon tail formed, dragon scales appeared, and dragon claws formed a pair of dragon claws. At this time, a part of the seal that was suppressing the cold dragon sword was broken. When the brilliance on the sword gradually dissipated, Yi Fan, who was wild with joy, waved his hand at the cold dragon sword that was floating in the air. Whoosh! The cold dragon sword turned into a ray of white light and flew back to Yi Fan's hand in an instant. Looking at the cold dragon sword that was surging with spiritual power in his hand, Yi Fan revealed a childlike smile on his face. This item has been in the sea-water river for nearly 100 years, and I have kept it in the clamshell for safekeeping, Sea-Water God said to Yi Fan with a smile. When you first came to the sea-water river, this item shone brilliantly and kept ringing. I wanted to show up and return this item to its original owner, but the time was not right at that time, and the karma was not mature, so I did not show up. Now you have obtained 2 cauldrons of secret patterns in one day, which is really the will of the heavens. Today I will return the Chunyo sword scabbard to its original owner, and I will have one less thing to worry about. Thank you, River God. After Yi Fan put away the cold dragon sword, he bowed to Sea-Water God and thanked him. It's nothing. You are too kind, sir. Sea-Water God waved his hand at Yi Fan and continued. The dragon has 9 sons, and each of them is different. Among the 9 sons, Chunyo is the eldest. He likes music and hates fighting. He is the most docile divine creature among the 9 sons. Now that you are the king of the demon realm, your position is respected, and your killing intent is blazing. I hope that you will think more about Chunyo in the future when your killing intent soars to the sky, and don't kill again. I am speaking from the bottom of my heart. Please don't take offense. I will remember your words, Yi Fan said respectfully to the river god. In that case, I will not delay your search for the cauldrons. I will take my leave now. The river god said to Yi Fan. Farewell, river god. Yi Fan cupped his hands to send him off. The white-haired old man with a cane nodded, then turned into a ray of auspicious light, flew into the river, and disappeared. An hour later, Akatsuki, who was knocked unconscious by Yi Fan's sky demon spiritual pressure, slowly opened her eyes. She found herself lying on a haystack in the dense forest, with a bonfire beside her. Beside the bonfire, Yi Fan, who was dressed in black, was leaning against a bluestone, roasting 2 pheasants over the fire. The pheasants were golden in color and smelled delicious. Beside him, Baihu stared at the pheasants in Yi Fan's hands, licking her lips from time to time. You are awake? Yi Fan turned the pheasant in his hands and looked up at Akatsuki. Where is this? Akatsuki sat up and asked Yi Fan. This dense forest is not far from Sea-Water River. I saw that you and Xiao Zhao were soaked, so I brought you here. You can rest, warm yourself by the fire, and eat something. Yi Fan said to Akatsuki. Akatsuki did not speak. She got up from the haystack and sat down beside the fire. Don't be stupid next time. If I hadn't caught you in time, you would have been sucked in by that black hole. Yi Fan said to Akatsuki. You are already an adult, but you still do things without a sense of propriety. Don't worry, there won't be a next time. Akatsuki hugged her knees and said as she added wood to the fire, "You will be alone in the future. No one will give you trouble." Yifan was shocked, but he did not speak. The two fell into silence. They could only hear the crackling of the firewood and the sizzling of the pheasant. "The pheasant is done. Here, eat." After a long time, Yifan was the first to break the silence. He handed a pheasant skewered with branches to Akatsuki. "I'm not hungry. You eat," Akatsuki said without raising her head. "What? Are you completely drawing the line between you and me?" Yifan asked Akatsuki. "You can't even eat the food I make?" Akatsuki bit her lower lip and lowered her head in silence. She used the branch in her hand to fiddle with the fire. "Your spiritual energy is exhausted and your body is weak. If you don't eat, it will hurt your body," Yifan gently persuaded Akatsuki. "You can be angry with me, but you can't be angry with your body." Akatsuki's eyes reddened and large drops of tears flowed out. She felt very wrong, but she could not say why she felt wrong. In detail, Yifan had not done anything wrong. He had brought her to Lingyun Cave to play and personally cooked for her. Even if he had hinted at her, so what? What he hinted at was the truth. But what about her? What did she do wrong? Was it wrong for her to like him? Was it wrong for her to want to take care of him? Right now, she wasn't angry with Yifan. She was angry with herself. When she thought of the two of them parting ways starting tomorrow, Yu Hongji's tears fell like a broken string of pearls, trickling down her face. Her shoulders trembled as she tried not to cry out loud. If you want to cry, then cry. Don't hold it in. It's very uncomfortable to hold it in. Seeing Akatsuki trying to hold back her tears, Yifan said with red eyes, "Wah." Hearing Yifan say this, Akatsuki's psychological defense completely collapsed and she cried out in grief. She released all the grievances, all the sadness, all the unfairness in her heart. This time, Yifan did not stop Akatsuki. Crying was also a kind of emotional catharsis. It was not a bad thing. After crying enough and venting enough, her mood would be much better. Akatsuki cried for a full 2 hours before she gradually calmed down. At this time, her eyes were red and swollen. Like a pear blossom in the rain, she kept sobbing like a wronged child. Yifan stood up and sat down next to Akatsuki. Then he took out a handkerchief and silently wiped away Akatsuki's tears. "Are we, still, friends?" Akatsuki asked Yifan while sobbing. "We are friends and best friends," Yifan replied while wiping away Akatsuki's tears. Really? Akatsuki looked at Yifan with her red and swollen eyes and asked in a choked voice. "Of course it's true. When have I ever lied to you?" Yifan said with a forced smile. To be honest, when Akatsuki cried, Yifan's heart also ached. For Yifan, the thing he couldn't stand the most was separation. Ever since he was young, his father, Yikong, had given him many small gifts. Zither, chess, calligraphy and painting, writing brushes, ink, paper, and inkstone. From big horses to small clay figurines and slingshots, he had carefully stored all of these things and never wanted to throw them away. Over time, his things had accumulated into an entire warehouse. In his eyes, these things were his companions, his friends. Not a single one could be missing, even if it was an ordinary clay figurine. If he was like this for objects, then what was more for Akatsuki, who had risked her life to save him and was deeply in love with him? Akatsuki used her sleeve to wipe away her tears and didn't say anything. "Come, eat something," Yifan said as he handed the pheasant to Akatsuki. Akatsuki choked with sobs and nodded her head. She took the pheasant from Yifan. No matter what, the two of them were still friends. Yifan didn't say goodbye to her. This made Akatsuki feel a bit comforted. 2 hours later, Akatsuki and Baihu both fell asleep. Akatsuki slept soundly on Yifan's thigh. Baihu curled up in Yifan's embrace and let out a sweet snoring sound. The two of them had been tossing and turning for most of the night. They were frightened and were already exhausted. Chapter 575. When the two returned to the sky above the East China Sea, it was already the next morning. Go back to your cabin and have a good rest. I'll talk to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Above the clouds, Yi Fan said to Akatsuki, who was holding Baihu and wearing a veil. Akatsuki bit her lip and nodded. The decision to separate from Yi Fan was not something she had made on a whim. She had seen Yi Fan's power with her own eyes after he became a devil. With his current strength, he did not need anyone's help. If she followed him, she would only distract him and drag him down. After all, the gap between their cultivation levels was too big. Instead of dragging him down, it was better to separate from him and form a partnership with someone else. In this way, Yi Fan would be completely free to search for the whereabouts of the 9 cauldrons. On the other hand, she could also provide information for Yi Fan. Whoosh! The 2 people and 1 fox disappeared into thin air above the clouds, and then instantly appeared on the deck of the warship. Akatsuki nodded to Yi Fan, then turned around and walked back to her berth cabin. Looking at Akatsuki's departing figure, Yi Fan felt a little disappointed. After watching Akatsuki return to her berth cabin, he turned around and walked toward Matsumoto Takeyoshi's berth cabin. Mr. Yi. The 2 ninjas guarding Matsumoto Takeyoshi's cabin saw Yi Fan coming and immediately bowed to Yi Fan respectfully. At the same time, they quickly slid the cabin door open. Yes. Yi Fan responded and stepped in. Inside the cabin, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was wearing a gray robe, was sitting on a futon and looking at the map of the Great Ming Dynasty on the table in front of him with a smile. He had received news that his only son, Zhou Dao, had led the Great Ming Dynasty's army to attack the troops of the 4 countries. The frontal attack of the troops, the sneak attack of the ninjas, Fujita Takeshi's Chimanduanjia, the formation of the troops, and Sato Kawa's killing spree. At this time, the troops of the 4 countries, except for the Mongolian army, were all defeated and were retreating. As the Mongolian army was mainly composed of heavy cavalry, they were very mobile and had the help of the Yi family's experts. Therefore, Zhou Dao did not have any advantage. If the situation continued developing, the 4 countries would definitely regroup and gather their forces to fight. When the 4 countries counterattacked, he would directly order Zhou Dao to completely open the border and avoid the battle, allowing the 4 countries to send a large number of troops into the Great Ming's hinterland. At that time, the entire Great Ming dynasty would be slaughtered like fish on a chopping block. Great Ming's dynasty was war to war dynasties, dynasty was war Ming dynasties was war dynasty. War, and retake control over the Great Mings. As Matsumoto Takeyoshi was thinking, Yi Fan walked in. Seeing Yi Fan enter the cabin, Matsumoto Takeyoshi looked up and smiled. Yi Fan-kun, you came back at the right time. Come, try the new tea that was just served. Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was in a good mood, gestured for Yi Fan to sit down and poured a cup of fragrant tea for Yi Fan. Yi Fan did not stand on ceremony. He shook his black robe and sat directly opposite Matsumoto Takeyoshi. He picked up the fragrant tea and took a sip. How is it? Matsumoto Takeyoshi asked Yi Fan with a smile. Good tea. Yi Fan said with a smile. These tea leaves were picked less than 3 days ago. Furthermore, they were brewed with the natural dew that condensed on the tea leaves before sunrise. The color is emerald green, and the tea is clear. The fragrance lingers on the lips and teeth. It's rare. Yi Fan was indeed an expert when it came to the way of tea. As his father, Yi Kong, liked to taste tea, Yi Fan had been influenced by him since he was young. He did not lose out to famous teas. Now that his cultivation had reached the Skyfiend realm, his 5 senses were so strong that no one could match them. To the current him, it was normal for him to be able to taste tea of this level. Ha ha ha! Matsumoto Takeyoshi laughed loudly. I didn't expect Yi Fan-kun to not only have such a high cultivation, but also a tea connoisseur. It's truly admirable. Yi Fan smiled and did not comment. Yi Fan-kun, why are you alone this time? Where's Miss Yu? Why didn't she come? Matsumoto Takeyoshi drank his fragrant tea and asked Yi Fan. It's her business whether she comes or not. It has nothing to do with me. Yi Fan put down his teacup and said calmly. After hearing Yi Fan's words, Matsumoto Takeyoshi first frowned, then smiled. What's the matter? Did the two of you have a fight? Matsumoto Takeyoshi picked up the teapot and asked as he refilled Yi Fan's tea. Miss Yu is efficient and doesn't talk much. She's a very good partner. Yi Fan said, however, her spiritual power is now exhausted and her cultivation has decreased greatly. Furthermore, she just came back from the dead and her body is weak. If she follows me, it will waste a lot of my time. I still have to spare some energy and time to take care of her. It's really too troublesome. Then Yi Fan-kun means. Matsumoto Takeyoshi looked up at Yi Fan and smiled. Mr. Matsumoto, can you let me go alone? Yi Fan asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi with a smile. Well. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled, and put down the teapot in his hand. Mr. Matsumoto, if you don't trust me, you can assign a faster person to be my partner, Yi Fan said as he leaned forward and stared into Matsumoto Takeyoshi's eyes. For example, the man in blue, Sato Kawaki. Matsumoto Takeyoshi had a smile on his face, but he was secretly shocked. Yi Fan's words had a deeper meaning. When Yi Fan first joined his camp, he already saw the hatred between Sato Kawaki and Yi Fan. Even a fool could see that the two of them had fought before and had a grudge against each other. Among the dozens of masters, Sato Kawaki was indeed one of the best. However, compared to Yi Fan, who was already possessed, it was like heaven and earth. Not to mention that Sato Kawaki was now at the border, assisting Taro Matsumoto in the frontline battle. Even if he was still in East Sea, he could not let him be Yi Fan's partner. With Yi Fan's current cultivation, he could instantly kill Sato Kawaki. He could take Sato Kawaki out in the name of looking for the 9 tripod cauldrons, and then find a random place to kill him. After that, he could come back and make up an excuse to get away with it. Yi Fan said that he wanted to change partners, but in fact, he was hinting that Matsumoto Takeyoshi should agree to his request to go alone. Otherwise, he would kill whoever followed him. Among the dozens of masters, other than Akatsuki, Bamuchangqing, and Onijiro, he would not show mercy to anyone. Bamuchangqing and Onijiro were currently on a mission outside. Even if the two of them were in East Sea, Matsumoto Takeyoshi would never assign the two of them to be Yi Fan's partner. Bamuchangqing was the leader of the Japanese shinobi world, Ryu. He was a righteous person who did not smile. His swordsmanship was unparalleled, and his ninjutsu was superb. On the other hand, Onijiro was extremely intelligent, and he was good at scheming. He was good at ghost force and in art. The two of them had a close relationship with Yi Fan, and they shared the same interests. If they were allowed to partner with Yi Fan would be like a tiger that had grown wings. If things went wrong, they might even team up to deal with him. The most suitable person to partner with Yi Fan was Akatsuki. How about it, Mr. Matsumoto? Yi Fan asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi with a smile as he drank his tea. Who wants to partner with me? Yi Fan-kun, what are you talking about? Matsumoto Takeyoshi said with a smile. Since Miss Yu is not feeling well now, let her stay on the ship to recuperate. Before Miss Yu recovers, Yi Fan-kun can act alone. After Miss Yu fully recovers, the two of you can go out to carry out missions together. What do you think, Yi Fan-kun? Instead of losing combat power, it was better to do Yi Fan a favor. Matsumoto Takeyoshi would not do a losing deal. Mr. Matsumoto, you trust me that much? Yi-fan asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi with a smile. Yi-fan-kun is loyal and devoted. Why would I not be at ease? Matsumoto Takeyoshi said with a smile. He was reminding Yi-fan that he still had Fujiwara no Chiko's 2 true souls in his hands. He was warning him not to act recklessly. Yi-fan naturally understood Matsumoto Takeyoshi's hint. The two of them had a tacit understanding and smiled at each other. In that case, I'll thank Mr. Matsumoto. As Yi-fan said that, he picked up the fragrant tea on the table and drank it in one gulp. Then, he put down the teacup and disappeared into thin air with a smile. After Yi-fan disappeared, Matsumoto Takeyoshi's smile gradually disappeared and his face sank. In today's round, he had let Yi-fan gain the upper hand. Do you want me to follow him? Behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi, a man in white with a veil on his face asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. No need. Matsumoto Takeyoshi said. Fujiwara no Chiko's 2 true souls are still in our hands. Everything is still under our control. The man in white nodded. How is Kazuken Sato's sword forging coming along? Matsumoto Takeyoshi quietly sipped his tea and asked. Everything is going well. The man in white replied. 300 swordsmiths are working day and night. At most, the forging will be completed in 3 months. After it's done, remember not to leak any information. Matsumoto Takeyoshi put down his teacup and said calmly. Mr. Matsumoto, don't worry. After it's done, no one will be left alive. The man in white replied slowly. A day passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, the sun had set and the lanterns were lit. In the cabin, the black-robed Yi-fan was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed in concentration. Baihu was lying quietly on a futon beside him, quietly warming herself by the fire. Buzz. Following a soft green light emerging from Yi-fan's body, a black-robed Yi-fan with fluttering silver hair slowly flew out from the green light. In the blink of an eye, 2 Yi-fan appeared in the cabin. The 2 Yi-fan were exactly the same. One was sitting cross-legged while the other was floating in the air. Yi-fan's primordial spirit had already left his body. Baihu was still lying there quietly with her eyes closed, motionless. At this moment, she couldn't see Yi-fan's primordial spirit at all. She had no idea what was happening in front of her. She even thought that Yi-fan was sitting cross-legged and cultivating. The slowly flying Yi-fan lowered his head to look at his own body, then looked at the completely unaware Baihu. He smiled slightly and instantly disappeared. Whoosh! A green light streaked across the sky like a shooting star, flying toward the heavenly lake at the speed of light. In the cabin of the battleship, the man in white who was also sitting cross-legged suddenly opened his eyes. He felt a powerful spiritual pressure erupt and then disappear in an instant. The spiritual power emitted by this spiritual pressure was so strong that he had never seen it before. It was very obvious that apart from Yi-fan, who had already entered the demonic path, no one else here could release such a powerful spiritual pressure. Sitting cross-legged, he circulated the spiritual power in his body and sensed Yi-fan's movements in the cabin. When he sensed Yi-fan's slow breathing and Baihu's aura, the man in white relaxed. Yi-fan was still in the cabin. Chapter 576. After Yi-fan left the East Sea, he traveled through the clouds like a flash of lightning. In the blink of an eye, he had arrived above the Heaven Lake in the Changbai Mountains. The surface of the Heaven Lake was as smooth as a mirror. Under the starlight, it shone as if it was a painting. Yi-fan, who was high up in the sky, was not in the mood to appreciate the beautiful scenery. What he needed to do now was to get the divine cauldron under the Heaven Lake as soon as possible. In order to enter the Heaven Lake to look for the cauldron, he had to break the 2 enchantments that Fujita Takashi and Satokawa Kai had set up. Although the enchantments set up by the 2 of them were powerful, it was a piece of cake for him. What he really needed to pay attention to was the chain reaction after the 2 enchantments were triggered. The sealing effect of the enchantments was only secondary. The main purpose of the enchantments was to warn people in advance. Once the enchantments were triggered, Fujita Takashi and Satokawa Kai would be the first to sense it and report it to Matsumoto Takeyoshi. With Matsumoto Takeyoshi's suspicious personality, he would definitely suspect Chen Xiaobei and send an expert to investigate. Yi Fan already had a plan to deal with this problem. The reason why he left his physical body in the East Sea and came here with his primordial spirit was to eliminate Matsumoto Takeyoshi's suspicions. The man in white had a high cultivation level. It was easy for him to sense the aura from Chen Xiaobei's physical body. This way, Chen Xiaobei would have an alibi. As for the expert sent by Matsumoto Takeyoshi, Chen Xiaobei did not care at all. With his current cultivation level, it would be the same no matter who came. Thinking of this, Yi Fan's body turned into a flash of green lightning and swooped down from the clouds at high speed. The two enchantments below were nothing to him. He wanted to enter the Heaven Lake directly. Boom! Boom! With two loud bangs, Yi Fan's green lightning pierced through the enchantments set up by Satokawa Kai and Fujita Takashi. Two rings of light, one blue and one yellow, appeared and spread out at high speed. The seal of the willow, the wisp, and the sand seal were both broken by Yi Fan's lightning-fast movement technique. Buzz, the water-repelling light ball shone again, enveloping Yi Fan as it rushed into the heavenly lake. In a military camp at the border of the Great Ming Dynasty. Inside the large tent, Fujita Takashi, who was dressed in a gray robe, sat cross-legged on a cattail hassock. Buzz! A golden light radiated from his body. Pop! As soon as the golden light appeared, it burst like a bubble and turned into countless golden fragments that fell to the ground. Fujita Takashi suddenly opened his eyes. The sand barrier that he had set up in the heavenly lake had been broken by someone. Moreover, it was broken by an expert in an instant. Fujita Takashi was shocked. He was very confident in his own Chimenduanjia. Apart from people of the same path, there was no way to break this technique. Even if it was a master of the same path, it would take a very long time to break this technique. However, this person was able to easily break the enchantment in an instant. One could imagine how high his cultivation was. Just what kind of expert could have such shocking means? Hula! Just as Fujita was perplexed, the curtains of the large tent opened, and Akane Sato, dressed in blue, walked in quickly with an anxious expression. "Brother Fujita, something has happened," Akane Sato said anxiously as he strode into the tent. "My willow, the whisk seal has been broken. Just a moment ago, a blue light flashed around him while he was drinking and having fun. It appeared for an instant and then disappeared in an instant." This scene shocked the slightly tipsy Fujita Takashi, causing him to sober up halfway. The enchantment that he had set up in the heavenly lake had been broken. He pushed aside the scantily clad courtesan beside him who kept urging him to drink. He put on a blue robe and did not even have time to put on his clogs. He went straight to Fujita Takashi's tent barefoot. Although he was lustful, he knew how to prioritize things. The fact that the enchantment had been broken only meant one thing. Someone was trying to seize the cauldron in the heavenly lake. This was a matter of great importance. He did not dare to neglect it. "It's not just your willow, the wisp seal." Fujita Takashi looked up at Akane Sato with a serious expression and said, "My sand seal technique has been broken as well." "What? Brother Fujita's enchantment has been broken as well?" Akane Sato was shocked when he heard that. In terms of enchantment techniques, he was far inferior to Fujita Takashi, who was proficient in Chimen. He thought that since his enchantment had been broken, Fujita Takashi's enchantment could still hold on for a while. He did not expect both of their enchantments to be broken at the same time. "We have to hurry to the heavenly lake now," Akane Sato said hurriedly. "It's too late." Fujita Takashi frowned and shook his head. This is the border of the great Ming dynasty. It's thousands of miles away from the heavenly lake. By the time we get there, everything will be too late. Then what should we do? Akane Sato asked Fujita Takashi. Inform Mr. Matsumoto about this, Fujita Takashi said. He's the commander. The East Sea is closer to the heavenly lake than we are. Let him think of a solution. Inform? How? Akane Sato frowned and asked Fujita Takashi. I have my ways, Fujita Takashi said as he took out an exquisitely shaped conch shell from his pocket. The conch shell was 3 inches in size and was carved out of jade. It was engraved with runes both inside and outside. It was green in color and shone brightly. What is this? Akane Sato asked Fujita Takashi. This is the Jasper Magic Conch. It has the effect of transmitting sound from 1,000 miles away, Fujita Takashi said. This thing comes in a pair, one for the male and one for the female. It's a little toy that I always carry with me. Before this trip, I gave the female conch to Mr. Matsumoto and brought the male conch with me in case of an emergency. I didn't expect it to come in handy this time. If that's the case, what are we waiting for? Hurry up and inform Matsumoto Takeyoshi. We can't afford to lose the divine cauldron, the barefoot Akane Sato said anxiously as he sat on the ground in front of Fujita Takashi. Fujita Takashi nodded. He held the conch in his right hand and pinched his sword fingers in his left hand. He closed his eyes and focused. He performed a strange technique and started chanting. Buzz, as Fujita Takashi's chanting became more and more rapid, the Jasper Magic Conch in his palm began to shine with a bright green light. The runes engraved on it shone brightly and appeared. Mr. Matsumoto, the heavenly lake seal has been broken. Make the arrangements quickly. Fujita Takashi said loudly. A few golden runes slowly flew out of his mouth and went straight into the conch in his hand. Buzz. The Jasper Magic Conch flashed a few times and gradually returned to normal. Fujita Takashi slowly opened his eyes and put the conch away. Is that it? Akane Sato asked Fujita Takashi. Fujita Takashi nodded. What did Matsumoto Takeyoshi say? Akane Sato asked. He doesn't know the secret conch spell. He can only listen but not speak, Fujita Takashi replied. Akane Sato nodded slowly. We've done what we can. The rest is up to Mr. Matsumoto, Fujita Takashi said calmly. Who do you think is the person who broke our seal? Akane Sato asked. I can't guess, Fujita Takashi replied. I only know that this person's cultivation level is high. It's far beyond what you and I can imagine. If you ask me, there's an 80 to 90% chance that this is done by that kid named Yi. Akane Sato looked at Fujita Takashi and said confidently. Him. Fujita Takashi looked up at Akane Sato and frowned. Impossible. Think about it. How many people know that we found the divine pool cauldron? Akane Sato asked. Between the two of us, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, Emissary Blue and Emissary White, and the 2 shadow ninjas, there are no more than 7 people who know about this. Why? Fujita Takashi asked. Among the 7 of them, who would leak this information? Akane Sato continued asking. Fujita Takashi thought for a moment and shook his head. No one would leak this information. He was right. Among the 7 of them, no one would leak this information. The 2 of them would not. Matsumoto Takeyoshi and Emissary Blue and Emissary White would not leak this information. As for the 2 shadow ninjas, they would not leak this information. Although the shadow ninjas' cultivation level was not as high as the 13 of them, in terms of loyalty, no one could compare to them. These people were all carefully trained and selected by Matsumoto Takeyoshi. They were absolutely loyal to Matsumoto Takeyoshi and would never leak any information. Once they fell into the enemy's hands, they would choose to commit suicide without hesitation. Let me ask you again. Among the dozens of masters, who has the ability to break our 2 barriers in 1 move. Akane Sato continued asking. Fujita Takashi frowned. Among the masters, there were indeed a few who could break their barriers. However, there were only 3 people who had the ability to break 2 barriers in 1 move. The man in white, Yamada Shingo, Yi Fan, and Chinkong Iha of the 5 boys of Japan. Apart from the 3 of them, no one else could do it. However, Yamada Shingo was Matsumoto Takayoshi's personal bodyguard. He was the person that Matsumoto Takayoshi trusted the most. He had always been by Matsumoto Takayoshi's side, so he was eliminated from the possibility. Although Chinkong Iha's cultivation level was very high, he was a calm and low-key person. He handled things very well. This did not fit his style. In addition, his master, the Japanese Ghost King, had a close relationship with Matsumoto Takayoshi. Therefore, he was quickly eliminated. There was only one person left, and that was Yi Fan. Everyone knew that Matsumoto Takayoshi had forced Yi Fan to look for the cauldron. The 2 of them were not on good terms. In addition, Yi Fan's cultivation level was very high. He was arrogant and unruly. Breaking 2 barriers in 1 move was very in line with his style. If it's really him, it's not strange, Fujita Takashi said. He doesn't know that the 2 barriers were set up by the 2 of us. It's normal that he broke the barriers to look for the cauldron in order to save his wife's true soul. Brother Fujita, you're thinking too simply. Akane Sato looked up at Fujita Takashi and narrowed his eyes. That Yi guy has been in our camp for a while. He knows all of our auras like the back of his hand. With his current cultivation level, how could he not sense that the 2 barriers were set up by the 2 of us? Fujita Takashi's expression changed. He looked up at Akane Sato. Chapter 577. In the clear and cold heavenly lake, Yi Fan activated the water-repelling light ball and dived down at high speed. This heavenly lake was thousands of feet long and hundreds of feet deep. It was neither big nor small. Although Yi Fan knew that the divine cauldron was inside, it was not that easy to find the location of the divine cauldron that was sealed by the enchantment. He dived down at high speed in the water-repelling light ball while using all his senses to carefully sense the movements around him. Soon, he sensed a gentle aura. This aura was calm and tranquil, clean and untainted, making people feel very comfortable. The speed of the aura was extremely fast. It came up from the bottom of the lake at high speed and headed in his direction. Yi Fan stopped activating the water-repelling light ball and floated in place. It was obvious that the other party had sensed his aura. Yi Fan had already guessed the identity of this person with this gentle aura. The newcomer was most likely the koi that Qinghu was talking about. As expected, following the sound of water flowing, a huge ball of light gradually floated up from the abyss below. The ball of light was 9 feet long, colorful, and intertwined with auspicious light. Within the auspicious light, a huge koi was swimming in it. The koi was 7 feet long and its body was colorful. Its scales were shining, and its huge fishtail was swaying. Its graceful body was extremely agile. It was indeed him. Looking at the dazzling koi in front of him, Yi Fan thought to himself in the water-repelling light ball. Although this koi's cultivation was not high, its aura was gentle, its heart was like still water, and its spiritual power was pure without any impurities. It was truly rare and precious. If this spiritual creature continued to cultivate at this realm, it would definitely be able to leap over the dragon gate in time, shed its fish form, and transform into a dragon. When the 5-colored koi saw the black-robed, silver-haired, and light ball protecting Yi Fan, it immediately moved. Its head and tail connected and swam in a circle on the spot. Buzz, as the 5-colored light flashed, a young man who looked less than 20 years old appeared in front of Yi Fan. The man was wearing a 5-colored brocade robe and a lotus-colored scholarly headscarf. His lips were red, his teeth were white, and his eyes were clear. He had the appearance of a scholar and was extremely elegant. "Greetings, Mr. Eldritch." The young man clasped his hands and bowed to Yi Fan. "No need to be so courteous, please rise," Yi Fan said to the young man with a smile. He had a very good impression of the koi in front of him. This reminded him of his original self. Back then, he was just like this koi. He had no distractions, a scholarly temperament, a peaceful aura, pure and untainted. But now? Right now, he was surrounded by demonic spirits and evil energy. His killing intent was boundless, and his resentment was boundless. He was neither a human nor a ghost, and he had even become the ruler of the demonic world. Looking at the koi in front of him, and then looking at himself, Yi Fan felt deeply moved. To be honest, he couldn't believe that he would become like this today. "Thank you, sir," said the young man politely, looking up calmly. "You are the friend of the heavenly lake that Qinghu mentioned?" asked Yi Fan. "In reply to sir, it is indeed this young man." The koi replied, "Thank you for your help last time. I really don't know how to thank you." Yi Fan said to the koi, "Sir, you are too kind. How could I dare to be greedy for credit?" The koi cupped his hands to Yi Fan and bowed. "The one who should be thanking you is actually this young man. If not for Sir breaking the 2 enchantments on the water, I am afraid this young man would have been trapped here in the future." Yi Fan nodded approvingly. This koi was neither arrogant nor impatient. He was not greedy or greedy. He was polite and modest. He definitely would not be a fish in a pond in the future. "Sir, you must have come to the heavenly lake this time for the enchantment under the water?" the koi asked Yi Fan. "Yes," Yi Fan said. "The enchantment is still some distance away from here. I can take you there," the koi replied. Yi Fan's eyes lit up when he heard this. He had originally planned to search for the divine cauldron in the heavenly lake himself. Now that the koi had offered to lead the way, it could not be better. "Then I'll have to trouble you," Yi Fan said to the koi. "Mr. Eldritch, you are too kind." The koi smiled and politely replied to Yi Fan. "I have lived here for some time. I am very familiar with this place. The only thing I can help you with is knowing the way." Yi Fan smiled. This koi was too good at talking. "Sir, please follow me." As the koi spoke, he turned around and activated the 5-colored brilliance on his body. He quickly dived downwards. Seeing this, Yi Fan immediately activated the water-repelling light ball and followed closely behind. The koi was originally a spiritual creature of the water. Furthermore, he had cultivated for many years. Naturally, his speed was not slow. The 5-colored brilliance swam quickly in the water. The 2 of them, one in front and one behind, soon arrived at the depths of the heavenly lake, which was 1,000 feet away and 1,000 feet deep. The 5-colored brilliance wrapped around the koi stopped him. Yi Fan also slowly stopped the water-repelling light ball beside the koi. "Sir, if we continue forward, we will enter the enchantment's area of influence." The koi turned to look at Yi Fan and said, "My dermic powers are weak and my cultivation is insufficient. I can only send you here. I'll have to trouble you this time." Yi Fan turned around and patted the koi's shoulder. "I don't have much to thank you for. I'll help you open up your spirit meridians," Yi Fan said. With a thought, he activated a wisp of extremely pure spiritual power from his sea of vital energy. It flowed through the koi's shoulder and into his meridians. Buzz, the center of Yi Fan's palm instantly exploded with light and 5 colors shone brightly. The powerful 5-colored spiritual power surged through the koi's meridians. It went on a rampage. It was as if it was unstoppable. "Say, sir." The koi wearing the 5-colored brocade robe only felt an extremely tyrannical spiritual power surging through the meridians in his body. It spread out at a high speed, instantly opening up many of the blocked meridians in his body. Even his sea of chi was nearly doubled in size. Buzz. After a moment, Yi Fan retracted the 5-colored spiritual power and returned it to his sea of vital energy. Right now, all of the meridians in your body have been opened up by my spirit energy. In the future, when you cultivate Qi, you will be able to do so without any obstructions. You will be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. Yi Fan withdrew his hand and smiled at the stunned Koi. This Koi had helped him a lot last time. This time, it had brought him to the location of the divine cauldron. In addition, Yi Fan had a very good impression of it. Therefore, he opened up all the spirit meridians in its body to help it cultivate. Originally, he had planned to introduce it to Nieqing. However, after thinking about it, this heavenly lake was clean and pure with rich spiritual energy. It was the best place for spiritual beings in the water to cultivate. The so-called cultivation of the heart was not important where one cultivated. What was important was the heart that sought the Tao. Now that the Koi's spirit meridians were all opened up, it was also due to the ripe karma and good karma. Jin Ling will never forget Sir's grace of rebirth. The Koi knelt on both knees and kowtowed to Yi Fan. Since it gained intelligence, it had spent hundreds of years to barely open up a small part of its spirit meridians. Now that Yi Fan had opened up all the spirit meridians in its body, how could it not be ecstatic? You have a mellow nature and a kind heart. Your heart is free of distractions and your heart is devoted to the Tao. It is really rare and precious. Yi Fan said as he reached out to help the Koi up. I helped you cultivate Qi. It is also a merit. At this point, Yi Fan could not help but smile bitterly in his heart. He was a demon monarch of the demon realm with blazing killing intent. It was really ironic to the extreme that he was talking about principles so shamelessly. Jin Ling does not know how to thank Sir. The Koi said after getting up, its eyes were red. You don't have to thank me. This is what you deserve. Yi Fan patted the Koi's shoulder and said with a smile, I am going to break this barrier now. You'd better stay away and not hurt yourself. If you and I are fated to meet in the future, there will be a day when we meet again. Knowing about the 9 cauldrons was not a good thing for the Koi. Jin Ling will remember. The Koi nodded to Yi Fan and said, Also, after I leave, there may be experts with special techniques coming here to look for this barrier. You must be careful and hide well. Don't let them find you. Just in case, I will leave you a word. As Yi Fan spoke, he held the Koi's right hand and used his index finger to write an upside-down swastika on its palm. Buzz! A red upside-down swastika light symbol appeared out of thin air and slowly fell into the Koi's palm. Sir, this is, looking at the upside-down swastika in its palm, the Koi raised its head and asked Yi Fan with a puzzled expression. This symbol can hide the aura of spiritual power on your body. As long as you don't show yourself, no one will find you. After 3 years, the light symbol will disappear automatically. Remember. Yi Fan looked at the Koi's clear and untainted eyes and said solemnly, Just pretend that I have never been here. Do you understand? I understand what Sir means. The Koi nodded and replied. From Yi Fan's tone, the Koi could tell that this was no small matter. Well, I hope you can return to the right path as soon as possible and transform into a carp into a dragon. Go. Yi Fan waved at the Koi and said calmly, Take care of yourself, Jin Ling will go now. The Koi bowed deeply to Yi Fan, then turned around and transformed into a 5-colored spirit carp. With a wave of its giant tail, it floated up and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Yi Fan slowly turned around, looked down, and urged the power of the heavenly demon. Boom! The flames rose again, and the skeleton reappeared. Yi Fan's eyes were blood-red, and the swastika in the middle of his brows disappeared, replaced by 1,000 rays of red light. He wanted to use the power of the heavenly demon to break the enchantment of the divine cauldron below. On the warship, Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was in his pajamas, held an ancient scroll in his hand and read it under the light. Buzz! A bright green light shone from an exquisite hollow box on the wooden table. Matsumoto Takeyoshi frowned and reached out to open the box. Inside the wooden box, the emerald green jasper magic conch shone brightly and flickered continuously. Matsumoto Takeyoshi picked it up, held it in his palm, and placed it next to his ear. Mr. Matsumoto, the seal of the heavenly lake has been broken. Make the arrangements quickly. Fujita Takashi's voice slowly came out of the jasper magic conch and clearly reached Matsumoto Takeyoshi's ears. Patter. After hearing Fujita Takashi's words, Matsumoto Takeyoshi's expression changed. The ancient scroll in his hand instantly fell to the ground. The thing that he was most worried about had finally happened. Someone had discovered the divine cauldron in the heavenly lake. Mr. Matsumoto, what's wrong? The white-robed man asked when he saw Matsumoto Takeyoshi's expression change. The enchantment of the heavenly lake has been broken, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said with a serious expression. The white-robed man frowned and he was shocked. Could it be that the powerful spiritual energy just now? Where is Yi-fan now? Matsumoto Takeyoshi turned his head and asked the white-robed man. He's still on the ship, the white-robed man replied. Let's go and take a look, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he quickly stood up from the futon, put on his gray robe, and walked out of the cabin. Chapter 578. After getting out of the cabin, the man in white with a veil on his face activated his spiritual energy. He supported Matsumoto Takeyoshi with his right hand and waved his left sleeve casually. Whoosh! The two of them disappeared into thin air and appeared on the deck of Yi-fan's boat in an instant. Matsumoto Takeyoshi, who was wearing pajamas and a loose gray robe, walked directly to the door and slid the door open. He entered the cabin directly. The man in white followed closely behind him. The two of them didn't say a word. They walked up the stairs of the boat and went directly to the berth cabin on the second floor. Voila! Matsumoto Takeyoshi's face was livid. He reached out and slid the wooden door of the berth cabin open quickly. According to his deduction, the person who broke the enchantment of the Heaven Lake was most likely Yi-fan. As long as Yi-fan wasn't in the cabin at this time, it would prove this point in another way. However, what he didn't expect was that Yi-fan didn't leave the East Sea. At this time, he was sitting on the futon, meditating with his eyes closed. Matsumoto Takeyoshi was stunned at first, then he walked slowly into the cabin. The man in white followed him into the cabin and closed the door behind him. Woo! Seeing Matsumoto Takeyoshi and the man in white entering the berth cabin, Baihu, who was lying next to the stove, immediately whimpered and hid in Yi-fan's arms. Yi-fan sat upright like a clock and didn't move. It seemed that he was indifferent to the arrival of the two of them. Matsumoto Takeyoshi saw this situation and his face changed slightly. He seemed to have guessed what was going on. He wasn't the only one whose face changed. The man in white behind him was also enlightened at this time. The powerful spiritual energy that disappeared in a flash just now was Yi-fan. And the one who was left in the cabin was Yi-fan's physical body. His primordial spirit had already left his body. What a great escape technique! If Matsumoto Takeyoshi hadn't suggested to come here personally to check it out, he would still be in the dark. The white-robed man thought to himself and scolded himself for his carelessness. The current Yi-fan had already entered the path of the devil, and his cultivation was completely different from before. For someone like him who had already entered the path of the devil, the projection of his primordial spirit was simply an insignificant skill. Mr. Matsumoto, I'll go now. The man in white was prepared to personally make a trip to Seraphic Lake. Matsumoto Takeyoshi waved his hand, signaling the man in white to stop talking. We'll talk about it when we get back, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he slowly turned around and prepared to leave. The man in white understood and reached out to open the cabin door for Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Mr. Matsumoto, Why did you come to look for me in the middle of the night and leave without saying a word? Just as the two of them turned around, Yi Fan's voice came from behind them. Yi Fan's question shocked the duo so much that their pupils instantly constricted. The two of them turned around in shock and looked at Yi Fan. On the praying mat, Yi Fan was still in a meditative position. His eyes were tightly shut and he didn't move at all. Matsumoto Takeyoshi and the man in white looked at each other and nodded in understanding. The man in white closed the door behind him. Matsumoto Takeyoshi went directly to Yi Fan and sat down on the praying mat. Yi Fan, Korin is really diligent. You're still practicing so late at night? Matsumoto Takeyoshi said to Yi Fan with a smile as he lifted the gray robe draped over his body. Mr. Matsumoto, you really know how to joke. Aren't you awake too? Yi Fan said as he slowly opened his eyes. He looked at Matsumoto Takeyoshi with a smile. It's so late at night and you're still in the mood to study and appreciate antique. That's really admirable. Matsumoto Takeyoshi's expression changed slightly when he heard that. Yi Fan's cultivation was really unfathomable. He even knew what he was doing so clearly. However, after hearing what Yi Fan said, Matsumoto Takeyoshi immediately felt relieved. It was obvious that the person who broke the two sealing enchantments was definitely not Yi Fan. The reason was simple. When he was reading and listening to the news from the Jasper Magic Conch, the enchantments had just been broken. If the person who broke the enchantments was really Yi Fan's out-of-body primordial spirit, then he definitely wouldn't know what he was doing just now. It seemed that the person who broke the enchantments was someone else. Ha ha ha! Matsumoto Takeyoshi laughed loudly. Yi Fan, Koin's cultivation is really high. It's really an eye-opener. Mr. Matsumoto, you didn't come here so late at night to test my cultivation, right? Yi Fan asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi with a smile. Oh. Ahahaha. Matsumoto Takeyoshi laughed to cover up his awkwardness. I just remembered that Miss Yu's body was weak, so perhaps she didn't bring any delicious supper for Yi Fan Koin. I saw that Yi Fan Koin's sleeping cabin was brightly lit, so I came to visit. Yamada Koin, Matsumoto Takeyoshi turned around and said to the man in white, tell the kitchen to prepare a delicious supper for Yi Fan Koin and send it over as soon as possible. Yes. The man in white standing behind Matsumoto Takeyoshi understood and replied. Mr. Matsumoto, you're really considerate. Yi Fan smiled. Then I'll thank you, Mr. Matsumoto. You're welcome, Matsumoto Takeyoshi said as he stood up from the soft futon. It's late, I won't disturb Yi Fan Koin's rest. I'll go back to the cabin first. Yi Fan smiled and didn't answer. The man in white politely nodded to Yi Fan and followed Matsumoto Takeyoshi out of the cabin and left the small boat. The moment the cabin door closed, the smile on Matsumoto Takeyoshi's face instantly disappeared, and Yi Fan's expression became serious. Phew! Yi Fan let out a long breath. This guy really knows how to take risks. If I wasn't here to support him, everything he did would have been for nothing. Yi Fan muttered to himself. Baihu, who was in his arms, immediately looked up at Yi Fan when she heard Yi Fan say this. This sentence made it sound strange. At this time, Yi Fan's expression was calm, his eyes were deep, and there was no murderous intent in his eyes. He's not Yi Fan. Baihu was shocked and suddenly jumped away from Yi Fan's arms. Silly girl, it's been more than 300 years. You even forgot about me. Yi Fan shook his head and smiled bitterly. Baihu was stunned at first, then her eyes lit up and she threw herself into Yi Fan's arms again. Now you remember? Yi Fan smiled as he stroked the white fox in his arms, whose eyes were red and who was whimpering incessantly. He smiled and said, Mr. Matsumoto, what about the Heavenly Lake? Do you want me to make a trip there? The man in white asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi after using a secret technique to completely seal the entire cabin. Yi Fan's cultivation was not what it used to be. He had to be careful and not let him eavesdrop on their conversation. Don't worry about it. Matsumoto Takeyoshi sat back down on the futon. He took off his gray robe and put it aside as he spoke. Don't worry about it? The man in white was confused. If Yamada-kun rushes to the heavenly lake now, you'll fall into Yifan's trap. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled as he picked up the teapot on the table and poured a cup of fragrant tea. Trap? The man in white asked. Do you believe me? If you leave the East Sea now, Yifan will definitely follow closely behind. Matsumoto Takeyoshi smiled as he looked at the man in white. If that's the case, wouldn't you be revealing 300 taels of silver? When the man in white heard this, he frowned and was shocked. He had indeed neglected this point. Once he left the East Sea, he would definitely arouse Yifan's suspicions. When that happens, the news of the heavenly lake containing the divine cauldron would be known by Yifan. What about the divine cauldron in the heavenly lake? The man in white thought for a while and asked Matsumoto Takeyoshi. Don't worry about that. Matsumoto Takeyoshi picked up the fragrant tea and used the tea lid to gently scrape it. There is a strong enchantment around the 9 cauldrons. Normal experts would not be able to reach it. As long as Yifan does not attack, we can be rest assured. The man in white nodded slowly. Boom, or within the heavenly lake, a red light exploded and a golden light flashed. A gigantic pillar of golden and red light rushed out from the bottom of the heavenly lake, which was over 10,000 feet deep, straight into the sky like a gigantic dragon. Yifan, who was inside the water-repelling light ball, floated silently in the depths of the heavenly lake. He smiled as he looked at the huge pillar of light in front of him. The enchantment of the 3rd divine cauldron had been completely broken by him. Buzz! After the pillar of light gradually dissipated, a bright golden light shone from the bottom of the water. Yifan lowered his head and looked down. His face was filled with joy. At the bottom of the water, a huge bronze cauldron stood there quietly. It was shrouded in golden light and had thousands of auspicious auras. The divine cauldron had appeared. Yifan controlled the water-repelling light ball to slowly descend to the foot of the divine cauldron. Above the dazzling divine cauldron, dense mysterious runes covered the entire body of the cauldron. It looked mysterious and unfathomable. Divine cauldron above, disciple Yifan, in order to save my wife's true soul from suffering and reunite with her sooner, I have specially come here to ask for the cauldron's pattern. Looking at the divine cauldron, disciple remembered disciple's sincerity and bestowed the secret pattern on the body of the cauldron. Disciple is eternally grateful. Just like the previous 2 divine cauldrons' pattern, Yifan knelt on the ground and prayed sincerely. After praying and kowtowing, Yifan, who was kneeling on the ground, stood up and observed the reaction of the divine cauldron. Buzz! After the golden light on the divine cauldron flashed 3 times, it disappeared and revealed a huge ancient cauldron body. Thank you, divine cauldron, Yifan said as he stood up. Shwa 2 rays of red light shot out from Yifan's eyes and landed on the divine cauldron's body. Golden runes slowly leaped out from the cauldron's body and flew along the 2 red light pillars into Yifan's mind. When the last rune flew in, Yifan bowed to the divine cauldron again. After the ceremony, he controlled the water-repelling light ball and slowly flew towards the surface of the water. He had already obtained 3 of the 9 cauldrons' secret patterns. If he could find the remaining 6 divine cauldrons, he would be able to comprehend the supreme secret technique and save his wife's true soul and reunite with her. Thinking of the day when he would be reunited with his wife in the future, Yifan's face revealed a childlike smile. Under the huge buoyancy, the water-repelling light ball's speed became faster and faster. It was like a huge bubble rising up at high speed. But very quickly, his smile began to disappear. He could keenly feel the aura of an expert with strong spiritual energy. It was on the surface of the water. This aura was familiar, but also strange. It was so strong that even he was shocked. Could it be an expert sent by Matsumoto Takeyoshi? Impossible, Yi Fan thought in his heart. Matsumoto Takeyoshi did not have such a strong expert by his side. If his guess was not wrong, this person was most likely an expert from Sietion's 9 monster Tenguards. Good timing. Yi Fan's lips curled and his mind moved. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.